afternoon.
After this time.
Yeah, so we have this one,
Yes.
then we'll go into parallels. Then we'll come back for the last one in the closing,
Before lunch.
before, after lunch.
After lunch.
After
The first last plenary.
Yes. The chairperson is in the room. So just some housekeeping. This is how today's program is going to look like. So we are starting with, this is plenary, is it four? Yes, plenary 14. And we'll then go into parallels break and then parallels. And then after parallels, we go into lunch. Then we'll come back for the last plenary, which was supposed to be a plenary 3, which is laws of partnerships in advancing regulatory science and affairs. And so this one will be followed by the closing synthesis of the conference. Does that make sense? So those will start in the parallel sessions. So the parallel sessions will have the ones from yesterday. We'll conclude those and then we'll follow with the ones for today. Yes, then we'll come back here for the last plenary and closing synthesis of the conference. Yes. And the chairperson is here. Welcome, Dr. Tomi. Take over. Thank you.
Give the talk, Chairman, because you're going to do it. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience with us. I think one of the themes for this conference is flexibility. Sorry, I had to rush from something else and got called into this one, and apologies. And I trust that the discussions will make up for the changes that we've made. And welcome to our panel members. As Alex has indicated, this session is going to talk around international best practice standards. And this becomes quite important because one of the themes that's been going on during this meeting is around harmonization. And you can only harmonize when you have standards that you've agreed to as a global and a continental community, and put in place mechanisms of how you align and ensure that you implement those standards. And so today we're going to be hearing from a few of our colleagues, and I'll introduce them as they as I prepare for them to come up to the stage to talk around the topic of implementing standards and best practices. And to kick us off this morning, we're going to have Alex, who will be giving us the first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's me again. So I'll just set the scene, and I'll be doing this presentation on behalf of Jim. Next slide. Next slide. So I wanted to start by defining what is an international standard, so that when the conversations are progressing in this plenary, you're able to understand, because not everyone in this room is a regulator or work in this space. So what is an international standard? This could be a guideline, a specification, a requirement, which is established and agreed internationally. And this would be standards or guidelines or specifications to ensure that the products are meeting requirements of safety, efficacy, or performance for medical devices and quality. And this is so we'll be looking at international standard in the context of medicines regulation. Next slide. So some of the international standards, the foundations are built or established under some of the international organizations that most of us are are aware or are members to, or we participate in their working groups and in their activities. And this is just an example. So we have ICH, for example, which is an international council for harmonization, has a lot of guidelines and harmonizes requirements on quality, safety, and efficacy, as well as guidelines also on multidisciplinary fields. And this is, it was founded by Japan, the EU, and US, I think, and there are other observers. I think WHO was one of them, in industry, IFPMA, I think, is represented. We also have WHO guidelines or WHO documents that are published as recommendation to countries, to regulators. Those are also some of the international standards that we know of. You have standards for good regulatory practices, GMP, GCP, and for example, the pre-qualification of medicines, vaccines, and diagnostics. They pre-qualify, and it is a regulatory process. Although in WHO it is meant to address something else, but it is a regulatory process. So there are standards that are used for the pre-qualification process. So those are some of the standards that we'll be talking about. In the context of, for example, medical devices, we have ISO standards. You have standards, for example, ISO 13485, which is for QMS for manufacturing sites of medical devices. For GMP, you have PICS. They develop guidelines and standards, and you have European Medicines Agency. It is a network of, I think, 27 countries, so international. A lot of countries are coming together, they're harmonizing, coming up with a single or requirements that are harmonized across the region. So those are some of the international standards. International Medical Devices Forum for Medical Devices, they develop guidelines, they agree on standards. So those are some of those things that we are also be coming out from the conversations. Next slide. Now, what is convergence? What is regulatory convergence? It is a common English terminology, but in the context of medical products regulation, convergence is a process where you have national regulatory authorities gradually aligning their requirements, processes, procedures, and tools with international standards or with those of more mature regulators. For example, you would hear, for example, South Africa aligns, or their guidelines are aligned with the European Medicines Agency guidelines. So that is convergence. Or countries in Africa developing guidelines through, for example, AMRH or regional harmonization initiatives, having common guidelines. Those are also, that is also convergence. And it does not mean identical regulations or identical requirements, because there are contexts, there are differences in region, in countries. So instead, it aims for compatibility, reduced duplication, and shared reliance pathways, faster product approvals, and all that. For example, it may lead to a single dossier being submitted to multiple jurisdictions. And we've seen this for example, here in Africa through regional harmonization initiatives, or in Europe, for example, a centralized pathway for marketing authorization, where a single dossier is applicable to a number of countries. Next slide. So how do you converge? These are the 5 best practices for convergence. Might not be exhaustive, but at least you are looking at these 5 elements. One is adoption. Adoption is countries formally adopting a standard. For example, a country, Nigeria, would say, for stability, will adopt ICHQ1A the way it is. And just that recognition, ICHQ1A would be applicable to Nigeria. Or WHO GCP, the way it has been developed and published, will recognize it as it is. So that is adoption. And we have adaptation, which is modifying standards to accommodate some local context. For example, pharmacovigilance, or benefit risk assessments when it comes to approval of medicines in the context of your population. So changing or modifying certain requirements to address some of the specific issues, that is adaptation. And then you also have reliance and recognition. Either you rely or you recognize trusted regulators. That could also be some of the one of the elements of convergence. Harmonization initiatives. We have a lot of these across the globe. In Africa, we have AMRH at a continental level. We have 7 in regional economic communities. And outside Africa, there are a lot of those as well. Capacity building. When you do these initiatives, you do capacity building, you come together, you're converging because now you're starting to speak the same language, adopting the same standards and all that. So these are some of the best practices when it comes to convergence. Next slide. Just in the context of AMRH or in the context of Africa, the AMRH drives a continental convergence, and it is done through regional harmonization initiative. For those that are aware, AMRH was launched in 2009, but implementation started in 2012 in East African Community, when the East African Community Medicines Harmonization Program was launched. So that was AMRH being implemented or tested at a regional level before scaling it up to the continental level. And so AMRH has been leading through technical committees, and in regional economic communities, you have expert working groups for most of the regional economic communities. So they would do it through identifying priorities. Like when we started, priority was harmonization of requirements for generic medicines and joint inspections. Only those 2 functions and only for generics. But now we've expanded to, in some regions, to clinical trials oversight, to pharmacovigilance, joint surveillance, and market control activities. They will develop tools and adopt and adapt them, guidelines, assessment templates, inspection methodologies, which are aligned to global standards. Capacity building, one through participating in these joint assessments, the other could be training, actual training in classrooms or training practically. And also they've been doing it by piloting and scaling. So the pilot, as I indicated, the pilot was in East Africa. Launched 2012, the first joint assessment was in 2015. It proved a concept, then it was expanded into other regions. Then at continental level, the pilot in 2023. So that is some of the things that AMRH has been driving in terms of convergence on the continent. Next slide. So in terms of regional excellence in action, just to show you that Africa is not behind, I've mentioned regional harmonization initiatives, the EAC, Zazibona, and all that, and adopting ICH, CTD, WHO PQ processes being adopted in some of these countries, and other as well, for example, adopting ICH 6 for their GCP activities, and also using those standards, for example, to and convergence to facilitate joint reviews of clinical trials for COVID-19 and Ebola. And continental level, some of us have been hearing, we piloted also continental listing through our 2 technical committees. So these are some of the things that we've done in Africa in the spirit of convergence and harmonization and adoption of standards and adoption. Next slide. So just to also mention here, the harmonization initiatives that we've established in Africa are also recognized globally. That means we also adopt those global standards. We are part of those discussions, and we also converge to the rest of the world. AMDF, for example, is a regional harmonization initiative of the International Medical Devices Forum, and it was recognized as such, I think, in 2024. We have the GMPTC of the AMRH. Through AMRH, Oudanep had granted an associate membership to PICS, and we've been joining the PICS seminars, working groups. We are part of the development of those guidelines, so we are converging and we are adopting and adapting. EMPTC has been learning, for example, it's an equivalent of the Committee for Human Medicinal Products in Europe, in EMA CHMP. So has also been learning, has also been observing the sessions and how the CHMP has been doing their work, benchmarking it so that we can also adapt to Africa. Zazibona, which is the SADC and EAC, these are regional harmonization initiatives of ICH. They've been granted that status and they are participating in some of the working groups of ICH. Next slide. Yeah, so this is just to say, you've been hearing from some of the high-level plenaries here that AMA will scale up, AMA will adopt. It has been transitioned to it. So basically this slide is saying the standards that are going to be institutionalized are standards that are aligned to global standards. They are not African standard. Because when people hear African Medicines Agency, local manufacturing, they assume we are developing our own standards to facilitate local production, for example. So this is to say the standards are aligned to global standards, the practices are aligned to best practices globally. And you know, the other things is to say countries will be brought together, their unified requirements and all that. Next slide. I think that will be my last slide. Next. Yeah, so this is basically saying the same thing. Convergence is no longer a theoretical concept in Africa. It is already happening through regional harmonization and through the AMRH and now AMA to institutionalize these efforts and these convergences, scale and sustain them. And Africa has demonstrated this practically, and it's through adoption of these guidelines. For medical devices, we've adopted IMGRF, for example, the table of content for IVDs or the guidelines, WHO guidelines for GMP or the TRSs of WHO, for EMP, ICH, EMA guidelines and harmonization. Next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex, for putting us all at ease that we're not reinventing the wheel, as it was said yesterday, but that we're aligning to global best practices. And as you were presenting, I reflected on what the DG said. The DG of AMA said that her ambition is that AMA is WLA. And with this approach around aligning to global best practices, I think we have certainly started to put the right foundation for that. So thank you to you and the team for leading this initiative. The next presentation will be from Luther Gwaza, who is from the WHO and will also speak on a similar topic. Thank you.
So 80 years ago, in 1948, at the establishment of the World Health Organization, the interim chair said that one of the reasons for establishing WHO was the fact that at that time, the scientific tools to ensure that everyone can attain the highest possible level of health were available, but still they were not available to all parts of the world. This is in 1948. There was no internet. There were no smartphones. The tools that you have today were not even available. But they were persuaded that they had the tools. 8 years later, We have all these technologies that we have, and yet we are still battling the same topic. How can we ensure that 194 countries who are member states of WHO can reach that goal? Do you think it's possible? I want to move my slides on my own. Can I have that thing? It's not working. This is going to be very difficult because he's moving my slides. Before I said next slide, now he has disrupted my flow. Huh? So, no, it's okay. We already moved it. People have already seen what I was going to say. So now it's not going to be fun. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Luther Gwaza. I'm going to put a disclaimer. The disclaimer is that I work for WHO. What I'm going to talk about is what I'm paid for. That's my job. So if I don't say it, so I'm going to convince you on where I started. Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible? Anyone who think it's possible? When there's a will, there's a way, yes. Anyone think that it's possible that Eswatini, as small as it is, to Nigeria, to South Africa, to Senegal, it is possible? Anyone? Yes? Then I have no presentation to do because I was going to convince you that it's actually possible if you guys had said no. But still, I had prepared these slides, so I just have to go through them. So what I'm going to share with you is actually that it is possible. And this is the challenge that we have, that regardless of the size or available resources, to adapt, implement the guidelines, as Alex was talking about, it should be possible that all the countries, no matter how much they have, how small, how big, but for you to do that, you have to think differently. And this is what I'm going to share. And I hope I can convince you that that can happen. But I'd also some background. What is the background that we're talking about? Alex already mentioned these international standards. From WHO alone, we have more than 200 written standards covering pharmaceuticals and biologicals, more than 200. From ICH, they've also probably more than 120 guidelines. So if you put them together, this is only mostly dealing with marketing authorization. WHO guidelines cover other areas. So we're talking about 300 guidelines. So if you imagine, how is it possible that you can also get to that level? You have to think differently. And okay. And the one other thing that happened was we did an external assessment and we found that, many of the countries are struggling with this topic. It sounds so easy, but many are struggling in terms of how do we actually do it? You have all these guidelines, we have limited resources. I am from the countries that I've mentioned. And if we want to develop guidelines, I used to do the work for SADC and also used to work as a regulator. It takes so much time, so much resources. So how can you do it? Right? How can we implement all these 200 guidelines from WHO, 150 from ICH, and then he added ISO, IMDRF? Sounds very complex. And despite this situation, the challenge that we have in the room, they are manufacturers. And here I'm on your side. How many manufacturers are in the room? How many? I'm on your side. I'm going to be advocating for you guys. So you need to really, So the challenge for manufacturers is what you have at the bottom there. Despite the fact that all these requirements are there, it's still very difficult for manufacturers. I'm speaking on your behalf to actually know what are the requirements in this country. What should I do? Because in many cases, these are not very clear. They are not published. And here I let you on a secret. I used to be a regulator. I used to assess. If I get something and we don't have the guideline, we shop around. Whilst I'm assessing your dossier, I shop around and look where are the requirements that I can follow. And then I send you a list of questions. And I can imagine you get a shock. I'm starting asking you, follow these requirements. And then you're thinking, when you prepared the submission, this was not listed. It's not there. And I was told it's still happening, right? So I'm letting you on a secret. That's what they do. They shop around. And what we want is we want the requirements to be very clear. When an applicant wants to submit an application, they should know which requirements should I follow. Eh? So this is what manufacturer. Am I saying exactly your challenge? It's true. Yes. I mean, if you are not really convinced, then maybe the regulators can continue what they're doing. Is it true? Yes. Right? So what we want is we want to see regulators efficiently and effectively capitalize on what already exists in a way that makes sure the requirements are clear, accessible, timely, transparent, but also fit for purpose, yeah, in their context. And you can do it with the resources that you have. This is where it's the tricky part. You can actually do it with the resources that you have. Yeah? You guys are not convinced. You can actually do it. And I'm going to show you how. I'm going to skip this one and go to the examples, just to show you that it's actually possible. And I've got examples. The first one is from SADC, right? I looked at their website and then I saw that, they say they adopted the WHO GMP manufacturing guidelines. Thank you very much. So here I'm telling my boss, I have proof that my work is done. I'm responsible for the GMP guidelines. SADC is using them. It's documented. So I'm earning my keep without rewriting or republishing any text. And they're using them for joint assessments. So instead of sitting down, spending time to say, let's recreate, republish, they actually said we can just adopt WHO GMP. And all we do now is to worry about how do we do the joint GMP inspections. The standard is already there. The second example is from MCAZ, Zimbabwe. Remember I said I work for WHO, so there's absolutely no conflicts of interest. I'm an African. And I looked at their website and I found out that they actually also have assigned by the Director General, and I understand is here in the room, on their website. And they simply say, we fully adopted. I hope Yit is here, but I know my other director is here. So, yeah. So they fully adopted WHO current GMP guidelines as is without rewriting them. And they included a caveat, a list with the caveat that notwithstanding the list, so I'm educating the industry, and I'll tell you how do you find the current ones. Notwithstanding the list, you should always follow the latest published WHO guidelines, must be used at all times. If you go at our stand, I have already given you, there's a QR code. You go at the WHO stand, you scan it, you get the current ones because MCAZ is using those current ones. The third example, actually, is from Mozambique. They passed an order, if you go on their website, and it identifies and recognizes guidelines issued by WHO. I wanted to stop just the WHO, but then, ICH, European Medicines Agency, PICS, and they included a list as well. So this is the third example. Now, all of you are thinking, yeah, but these are all just African countries, out there, they do it differently. This is not good practice. Well, I come from Switzerland. Swissmedic. The second highest, I think, export from Switzerland is biopharmaceuticals. It's a big industry. Swissmedic, I mean, they're rich. They have money. But Swissmedic are smart also. They said, we are not going to bother to do all these things. FDA publish each ICH guidelines on their website. EMA does the same. Swissmedic says we have money and we know how to use it very well because what we understand is about resources. They simply passed a policy that says once an ICH guideline reaches step 4, right? ICH is step 4 and step 5. Step 5 is the implementation by the countries. They said once it reaches step 4, it's implemented in Switzerland. Except when we say it doesn't. So they put an opt-out, right? And guess what? Out of the 120 something guidelines from ICH, there are only 6 exceptions listed on the Swissmedic website. 6, less than 5%. And yet someone who does not have the same amount of money as Swissmedic, as Switzerland, they are rewriting and say, context issues. 5% is only when they realize that it's context specific. And then the last example is TGA Australia. They publish implementation status of each international scientific guidelines with annotations. So you go one by one, they put annotations, to allow them to contextualize to their situation. And you can see the example there. So what do we learn from all these examples? Remember, we're talking about good practices. So the lessons there are, number one, it's not, I'm not saying you should copy any specific model, but I'm saying you should understand the principles of clarity. You know, the internet is playing here, right? Accessibility, transparency, stakeholder engagement. Any manufacturer that wants to submit to Switzerland will know what the requirements are, but also they have used the resources they have in a smart way, right? Which I'm referring to as proportionality of effort. You have to allocate your effort where it matters the most and where you don't have to spend, but also public health primacy and contextual adaptation. We're not saying just copy everything, right? And then the essence of smart implementation is knowing, this is the tricky part, right? Knowing which option to use, when to use it, and why you're using that particular option. Because remember, what we really want is to protect public health whilst we're enabling efficiency, predictability, and equitable access. And there is no one size fits all. That's why I told you that it's possible for a small country, it's possible for a big country. The only difference is you just need to know what strategy am I going to use in my context that fits the resources that I have and the needs that I have. So this is the basis of why we're writing these good practices. It gives these three options. And again, you see the big squares showing you the level of effort. If you decide to use international guidelines as inspiration, right, and you write your own, you're simply using them as an inspiration, you write your own, it takes a lot of effort, you have to have, you know, the expertise and all those things. You can adapt. But I'm also breaking down that in the good practices that you are developing, it breaks down adaptation to say, but what does that actually mean? You have one option, which is integrated adaptation, which means you republish, but with your specific context. You can simply do annotated adaptation, the example that, you know, that I was giving you, that you can simply adopt and put a reference and then only publish the specific situations that apply in your context. Saves you time. You're still addressing your own context. The last one is adopt as is. But again, adopt as is has got different options. Again, level of effort. The examples I gave you, you can decide to do what FDA does for ICH guidelines, right? Or what EMA does for ICH guidelines. You can decide to do what Swissmedic does. You can decide to do what TGA does, right? So you have different options. And along those options, there are also pros and cons. And again, the level of effort that you have to do. So if you draw from this, what are the principles that apply regardless of the pathway? The regulatory requirements must be clear, accessible, and publicly available. Whatever the requirements that apply, whichever option you use, the stakeholders should know. They should not second guess which requirements apply in your country. Okay, I think maybe I should sit down now. The other aspect, no matter the pathway, this is also very important. Stakeholder consultation. Good regulatory practice says you cannot impose something without consulting those who are going to be impacted by those requirements. Consult the stakeholders. It does not necessarily mean you're going to republish, but tell them, allow them to give you feedback, right? And then you incorporate it before you actually put things out. Give them sufficient time to respond and deal with their response based on the pathway you're going to use. Your decisions must be transparent and responsive to their input. Regulatory entities must give adequate time to implement. Yeah. You know, remember I said I'm on the industry side this time. You can't publish a requirement today and then tomorrow you are enforcing it. Come on. Some of the requirements they may need to go and change and, you know, change their facility and do all these things. They need to go and train people and change the SOP, because if they change tomorrow, you're going to check and say, when did you change your SOP? So give them time to change those SOPs and to train their staff before it is effective. So this is what you need to do. And then I think I will move to my last slide. I know you guys are paying attention, but I'm also, even though I'm not seeing my chair, but she's like, come on, you should now at least sit down. You have made your point. And I also think that I've made my point. So I'm going to skip to the last one, because these are the things you can look at them later on. So the last slide I want to say here is that it is actually possible to have these good practices for implementing international scientific guidelines. And what this draft document that we are working on advocates and provides the tool. So it actually gives you the how to, right? To allow flexible, principle-driven approach to guideline implementation, enabling regulators to actually do their job, which is to protect public health while they make use of the international standards that are available. And therefore, I go back to my point that I actually think, and I'm persuaded because I'm an optimist, that it is actually possible, no matter the size of the agency, no matter the resources. All you need to do is to be able to say, how do I work smart? Huh? You don't have to follow the FDA and say the FDA published the ICH guidelines, so I'm going to follow the same. They have more resources than you. You might just decide to do what the Swiss medic does and just put a policy and say, whenever WHO, here I'm changing the language because remember, it's my job. So what I'm advocating for you guys to do is whenever WHO publish the TRS, the next TRS is coming in May, whenever they publish it, it's effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luther. You did an excellent job at bringing us an industry closer. We're not always that close, but it's clear that compliance with standards meets and it's a shared goal between the regulator and industry. And thank you for putting that so eloquently. We're going to swiftly move to our next presentation, which is an abstract presentation. Then from there, we'll have a panel discussion. So our presentation will be from Victoria Palmi from the EMA on sustainability and innovative resource management or predictability for resources, guidelines, processes to help conversions. Over to you, please.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm not going to talk about guidelines. We already heard about this. I'm going to talk about people. And I'm going to talk about some of the things we do in Europe so that our assessors can just focus on assessment and we can take care of everything else. I think I'm still on Luther's presentation. "30 years ago, the EMA was probably in a similar situation that you are today. We had very fragmented regulatory frameworks. We had very different guidelines. We have very different processes and timetables. And it was only when the first innovative products were coming to the market that our head of agencies realized that they were not be able to cope with all this work on their own, that they needed to create a system so that they can put resources and evaluate all these processes together. So there was a decisive step in Europe to promote public health, support innovation, reinforce our European pharmaceutical industry, some of the things that you are doing today. And therefore, the centralized procedure was created. And it was created to allow patients in every single country of the European Union reach their medicines with a single submission, a single evaluation. Products have an authorization automatically in all the countries of the EU, allowing all the medicines to reach our patients. This is still not my presentation, but I'll let you deal with the slides. So in any case, what I wanted to say today is that there are many things that the EMA is doing and the network of the European regulators is doing to manage the more than 4,000 experts that we have in our network, to manage resources across more than 30 countries around the network, and to pull all the resources together to be able to cope and manage the work we're doing. We were hearing Wayne talking the other day that she's a regulator for her national agency during the day and a regulator for the AMA during the evening or on the weekend. And this is some of the things I wanted to discuss with you today is what make our life a little bit easier. So maybe I stop, I wait for my slides. Otherwise, I'll just continue without slides. It doesn't really matter.
Can IT just confirm if they have them? Can we get a signal? They're coming up. Okay, here we go.
So one of the things we do to facilitate the life of our assessors is have very clear eligibility criteria. Our assessors are the same ones that work for the EMA as the ones that work for the member states. So we have very clear distinction of the products that we are responsible for at the European Medicines Agency to the products that the national agencies are doing. For 10 years, our scope was very narrow. Between 1995 and 2005, we were only looking at very few biotech products. It was only in 2005 that we increased our scope to add products on HIV, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, diabetes, and orphan medicines. And in 2008, we slightly increased the scope again to include advanced therapies and autoimmune diseases. Our scope has not changed since. The EMA is responsible for around 100 approvals every year, while the member states still approve more than 1,000 products every year. You may see the workload is still very different. We might be looking into a bit more difficult products. They are looking at a very big amount of numbers. There's work for everyone, but there's very clear eligibility criteria so that industry is clear where they need to apply to. Some of the things we do as well to facilitate the life of our assessors is harmonize our procedures, enhance work sharing, and promote reliance. Our legislation is harmonized across every single member state. Our guidance are the same. We have aligned frameworks that ensure we have consistent standards across all member states. And we have standardized dossier formats accepted EOI. Our assessments are common, and this reduces the variability in the evaluation. We have the same template. It doesn't matter if you apply for the EMA, it doesn't matter if you apply to one or more than one European member states. The templates that the assessors have to take, fill in, and process, they are the same. We promote mutual recognition and reliance, and this really is the only way to streamline regulatory process, like Luther was saying about the guidelines. We have multinational assessment teams, and this really supports our resources constraints, because we have also constraints despite the 4,000 numbers that you always hear. And this really promotes capacity building. And we constantly are simplifying our templates, are trying to see how we can make our processes leaner, and this really supports shorter approval times. Something that seems really boring is actually very powerful. We are predictable. We have predictable timelines, and this really facilitates an efficient coordination and workload management. If you go into our website, you can see 3 years in advance the meetings of our committees. You know that if you are going to submit your procedure in January, the meeting is going to take place in 2026 from the 26th to the 29th of January. If you are an assessor and you know your product is going to be discussed there, you know when you need to be ready. If you are an assessor and you have a variation, you know when your assessment report is due. Or if you are not an assessor, you know you might have a lighter week that week, but you need to concentrate the following. That is when you have to provide comments to the rapporteur's assessment report. Predictable timetables are key to coordinate the workload that all our assessors are doing so that they can work around their national procedures and their centralized procedures. Building capacity across the network is key, and my colleague Radwan will be speaking with more detail about this later, but we have the EU Network Training Center. This is a hub for all our assessors to share regulatory training, and there's courses available on reliance, on science, on pharmacovigilance, on clinical trials. We have our own strategy also to increase the number of assessors and their competences. We promote on-the-job training with these multinational assessment teams. We have guidances and QA updates all the time with questions and answers that actually facilitate the difference or how should we come into one point or another. And we often will do workshops or webinars to harmonize approaches on how we do our assessments so that assessors can talk to each other on how to approach scientific issues. We really promote expert mobility and secondments, and we have staffs changes between the EMA and national competent authorities. Between the national competent authorities, between themselves, they are shadowing, there's mentoring programs, and these really build expertise and consistent standards. There's active information sharing across the network, and we have a lot of IT platforms that are of use to all of us to provide assessments, to work together on ADRs, clinical trials, so that we can have real-time data exchanges. And there's a regular coordination via TCs, working groups, and secure document sharing. And on this, actually, the point is not only to have the technology be kind, because how is data flowing freely across the EU? Actually, this needs agreements and aligned data and standards, a legal framework. Sometimes it's the legal frameworks that are actually more difficult barriers to the organization. It's not actually the technical people that give us the tools. So long-term cooperation among all the EU member states is essential. And we have actually a curriculum for you if you want to know how to facilitate interoperability of databases. The last thing I want to highlight is the leadership of the EU medicines network, unified and efficient European medicine regulatory system. They are the ones that are promoting consistency, promoting transparency, promoting collaboration, and promoting an efficient resource use. They are the ones that are setting our priorities and approve our work programs together, and they approve our budgets. They make us adopt rules and ensure that we are cooperating with each other, and they monitor our funds. They are the ones driving IT innovation, harmonizing our guidelines, and building capacity. And they really coordinate their efforts so that we avoid duplication and optimize our expertise. This is in a nutshell a bit the strategies we use so that the 4,000 experts on our network across 30 countries can just focus on what they do best, assessing. So I talk about eligibility criteria, information sharing, predictable timetables, capacity building, harmonized procedures and work sharing, and I talk about leadership. And the thing is that every little helps. So we are where we are, and we have built our system across all these 30 years, but the EU success is based on cooperation, it's based on resource sharing, and it's based on alignment. And we believe these are the themes as well that we've heard in this week, and they will guide efforts to enhance medicine regulations across Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria, for sharing that example that really speaks around how at a regional level, through cooperation, you allow best practices. We'll now move to the panel discussion. And if I could get mics, please, for my panel members, that would be great. So we have colleagues representing agencies as well as from EAC, so representing EREC. And I'm going to ask them to introduce yourselves, but as you do so, to also speak around how your agency is enabling compliance to global best practices. So I'll start with Julius Otim from the EAC, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, the presenters. and thank you, my colleagues who are here. So, Dr. Gwasa, you're my neighbor, but I'm not going to adopt your style of speaking through the slides. So I'm going to adapt by speaking without the slides. So at the ESC, indeed, we do appreciate the importance of adapting and adopting the guidelines. And that is what we do because we do appreciate that the process of developing of the guidelines comes at a cost. But we also do know that the development of international guidelines go through a scientific process of experts. And by the time the guidelines are approved, there is scientific consensus based on evidence. So international guidelines are therefore trusted, and we do trust them at the ESC. At the ESC last year, we sat in Nairobi because we had been using our medicines registration guidelines for the SCoMRA project for more than 10 years, and we felt that we needed to revise them. And indeed, the process of revising those guidelines, we didn't reinvent the wheel. We looked at the current international guidelines with the current evidence. So the process was simple. All what we did was to ask the experts from the NRIs to look at the current international guidelines. And then we had some online engagements. And then we sat just for 5 days in Nairobi. And then we were able to revise our guidelines for medicines registration. And I must thank AUD and EPAD for facilitating that process. So that's one of the examples. We also considered revising our GMP guidelines. And again, we decided to go through that same process. We have not completed it yet. So we identified, because for the ESC, the lead agency for GMP is the National Drug Authority of Uganda. So we asked the experts to look at the current guidelines. And they accepted that they are going to look through those guidelines. And then after that, they will be able to make a report. And then we are very confident that again, we shall be able to sit in one plenary with the representation from all the NRAs. And I'm sure we shall be able to have an updated GMP guidelines for the ESC. So it's a simple process. Usually when we decide to have, even just developing a policy, you hire a consultant, sometimes you pay as much as $50,000. So it becomes expensive. So at the ESC, once we develop those guidelines, usually there must be consensus. So we have to make sure that there should be representation from all the countries. And then after that, we take them through the approval process, through the structures of the ESC. And usually at the ESC, it's usually the Sectoral Council for Health, which is usually it's a sitting of the experts from the health ministries, the permanent secretaries, and then the ministers. And once we make that report and then they sign, then the guidelines become a binding document to be used by all the ESC partner states. Of course, within that also, we notice that some of the countries sometimes are slow in terms of implementation. Also, we know that the medicines regulatory authorities are backed by, they are established by the laws through the national parliaments. And we know that the guidelines are meant to guide, for example, the applicants, how they should abide by the laws. So sometimes we find that there's a misalignment, and it's a challenge to harmonize legislation across the countries. So those are the two examples and I can give in terms of adapting and adopting international guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I could ask a follow-up question, I mean, one of the elements that Luther spoke to is around consultation prior to finalization of the guidelines. In your process as a REC, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question because like I said, there must be a consensus. And once you don't have the consensus, and implementation becomes a very big challenge. So we do extensive consultation. Usually for the NRAs, the technical experts from the NRS, it's very easy. You know, it's easier to deal with the technical issues, but much more easier to deal with other issues, for example, political issues. So once we call them to one room, and then we develop the guideline, it means that there's already a consensus from the technical part. But also we know that the industry is very important. And because the guidelines are also very important to the industry, because the guidelines are meant to facilitate access. They should not be an impediment. So we do consultations with the industry as well, so that if they have issues, we address them. The only challenge we have at the EAC that some of the countries, we have more, in some countries, the industry is more organized. They have an association, for example, Kenya. In fact, tomorrow, I'm supposed to interact with the leaders of the industry from the Republic of Kenya, that is CAPI. So they have some issues they want to discuss with me. And then I'll have to respond and see how we can support them. So we do engage the industry. Consultation is very important, and we do engage the industry. And in some of the countries, the industry is not so well organized. So sometimes it's difficult for you to reach out because you cannot go and speak to people individually. So that can be a challenge. And we want to see if we can be able to have an East African platform for the pharma industry. That would make it very easy for us to do consultation. But also we went ahead and we have plans to further support the industry. For example, once we have the GMP guidelines, we're saying that we also need to go ahead and even train the experts from the industry. We had one training in Kigali, which was facilitated by Professor Kale. So we have that good cordial relationship. So we can share the guidelines, we listen to the industry, but also train them so that they can be able to align by the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. We'll now move to agency level, and I'll ask DG for the Ghana FDA to reflect on the same question, please.
Thank you. Kwabena Frimpong Puni with the Food and Drugs Authority. I think using international standards are very important. Although sometimes you realize that why can't we have one single international standard? We do have ICH guidelines, WHO guidelines. And if you look at how these guidelines are developed, virtually all these entities are part of it one way or the other. So as an agency, as we adopt and adapt, we are looking forward to a day that we can have a single harmonized document so that it will not be like WHO TRS documents or ICH guidelines and all the other guidelines. I think FDA Ghana was originally together with the Pharmacy Council of Ghana. Until 1992, a law was established. And then the FDA Ghana and the Pharmacy Council was separated. And fortunately, I have some of the older people still in this meeting, people like Mr. Butchie. And at the early stages, even in 1992, where the organization was in its formative stages, they decided that we will adopt and adapt international best standards. So at that early stages, the organization adopted the ICH guidelines, but I must say that for its implementation and understanding, it was not easy. And I think some of the NRAs here can understand and appreciate this comment. We moved on to adopt standards from WHO, the US FDA, the Health Canada, and we did all these based on how well it fits our purpose. And actually, with time, we were able to kind of mix some of the standards like the United States Pharmacopoeia, the British Pharmacopoeia to be part of our amended law. So in the law, it is clearly stated that we use those standards as and when they are revised. So they are all now part of even the law that we use in Ghana. We can say that using WHO standards has really helped the organization very well. It has improved the training of our staff, and almost everything we do is based on these international standards. I think within Africa, we are one of the countries that started early to depend on the WHO collaborative registration procedures. And this really enhanced the speed and the precision with which we were doing registration of medical products. The WHO Global Benchmarking Tool as a standard has also been very important and critical for us as an agency. But following that standard was not very difficult because at the teaching staging of the organization, we have already adopted and adapted ICH guidelines and other guidelines. And at the regional level, we work together with the West African Medicines Regulatory Agency. We also try to harmonize our documents within these countries so that it will make our life very easy. So what I can say is that adopting and adapting these standards are very good. It helps us not to spend so much money paying consultants, giving much training to our staff to develop all these guidelines all together. But we are able to kind of use what is already available. But there are always challenges. Sometimes there are legacy issues from our past. And that is one of the reasons why sometimes we may have to amend or introduce little clauses into some of the well-developed standards. But I think over the period, we have been able to deal with most of these legacy issues. And gradually we are implementing majority of these international standards as it is. I think it will be very interesting if among the various countries within Africa, we can all get to a stage through the AMA system where we can have one single harmonized documents for use, which can make our lives very simple. But beyond that, I am looking forward to a day where we will not have ICH guidelines, we will not have WHO guidelines, but all will be one and unified. There will not be pick and picks documents, that documents and all that, but we can harmonize all as one. I could appreciate what Luther said when he was looking at the perspective of the industry. Sometimes we have an applicant who is so used to maybe the EMA guidelines and is coming to Ghana to register products. And probably we are more used to the WHO guidelines. And you see that when you mirror these guidelines, there are always some minor differences that the various international bodies stick to. So I'm looking forward that for easy implementation, we can get to a day where we have one harmonized document. I don't know whether WHO will be leading or whoever, but for us, if it is one harmonized document, it will be very good for the regulators and also for the manufacturing industry. Thank you to me.
Thank you. We'll move now to our colleague from Senegal to reflect on the same question, please. Thank you.
Alors, merci. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Donc, je vous prie de bien vouloir mettre les casques. Donc, merci à Madame la Présidente. Permettez-moi de remercier toute l'organisation et tous les partenaires qui ont rendu possible cet événement extrêmement important et qui nous ont facilité la participation. Donc, je suis le professeur Serigne Omar Sarr, je suis pharmacien. Je suis le directeur de l'homologation des essais cliniques et de la sérialisation au sein de l'Agence sénégalaise de réglementation pharmaceutique. Et ici, je représente le directeur général empêché, le docteur Alioune Ibn Aboutalib Diouf. Alors, vous me permettez de féliciter tous ceux qui m'ont précédé avec leurs interventions extrêmement pertinentes sur lesquelles nous nous alignons parfaitement. Nous parlons de santé globale, nous parlons de globalisation et il faut qu'on fasse tout pour éviter le double ou le multiple standard. La qualité, elle est unique, elle est universelle. Et la qualité du médicament, elle est unique. Sa sécurité, elle est unique. Son efficacité, elle est unique. Et donc, tout ce dont nous parlons, je pense, vise ce seul et unique objectif, c'est d'avoir une seule qualité, une seule efficacité, une seule inéquité pour tout produit de santé. Et cela passe par des référentiels, cela passe par la normalisation, cela passe par la standardisation. Réguler, c'est décider, décider, c'est mesurer. Et pour mesurer, il faut avoir un repère, il faut avoir un référentiel, c'est tout le sens de toute cette documentation qu'on peut appeler normes, qu'on peut appeler ligne directrice, qu'on peut appeler pharmacopée, etc., etc. Nous sommes bien placés, le Sénégal, pour en parler, puisque cette approche nous a permis de capitaliser et de raccourcir les étapes sur le chemin d'obtention du niveau de maturité 3 de l'OMS. C'est une jeune agence qui est née en 2022 et qui a réussi en 2 ans, au moins de 2 ans, à atteindre le niveau de maturité, faire preuve d'une certaine intelligence dans l'exploitation de l'existant. Ne pas recréer la route, mais également exploiter surtout l'existant à travers les productions scientifiques de l'OMS, à travers les différentes pharmacopées. Nous n'avons pas notre pharmacopée, mais nous servons beaucoup de l'USP, de la pharmacopée internationale, de la pharmacopée britannique, de la pharmacopée européenne, pour pouvoir nous prononcer sur la qualité des produits de santé. C'est important. Et ce qui fait que nous n'avons pas eu beaucoup de difficultés à générer nous-mêmes des documents, à dépenser beaucoup d'énergie pour produire des documents qui seront difficilement acceptés par les autres. Je crois que ICH, l'historique même de ICH nous a permis de comprendre en fait l'importance de l'harmonisation. L'Europe a connu ce problème, elle a dit il y a 30 ans. L'industrie avait ses guidelines, l'Europe avait ses guidelines, le Japon, les États-Unis, etc. ICH, c'est International Conference of Harmonization. Je pense que cela, quand même, est assez évocateur de l'importance et de la nécessité d'avoir des référentiels communs. Nous évoluons dans un environnement communautaire, sous-régional avec l'UEMOA, l'Union économique et monétaire ouest-africaine, régional avec la CEDEAO, la communauté économique des États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, et maintenant avec l'AMA. Et dans ces différentes entités régionales, nous avons des cellules d'harmonisation qui travaillent d'arrache-pied depuis longtemps pour produire des guidelines, pour produire des règlements qui s'imposent aux pays avec un système de revue annuel pour s'assurer que les pays ont bien et effectivement implémenté ces documents-là sous peine d'être notés plus ou moins négativement. Je crois que ça a été un changeur de jeu, ça a été un catalyseur d'efficacité, un catalyseur d'efficience, un économie d'énergie et de ressources, et un moyen de rationalité. Et le terme a parlé de proportionnalité, c'est extrêmement important, et je crois que ça fait partie des 10 principes de bonne pratique réglementaire, la proportionnalité. Et je crois que nous avons cette opportunité pour aller rapidement. Et j'invite vraiment les pays à s'engager dans cette dynamique avec l'outil d'intercomparaison. Le GBT, c'est en fait Global Benchmark Tool, c'est l'intercomparaison pour pouvoir avoir des décisions acceptées intercomparables, des niveaux intercomparables d'un pays à l'autre. Je crois que tout ce dont nous parlons se ramène, n'est-ce pas, aboutit au même et unique objectif. Oui, on peut dire que tous les chemins mènent à Rome, mais parmi ces chemins, il y en a certainement qui sont les plus courts, les plus sécurisés, etc., etc. Et je pense que c'est important par rapport aux avantages, aux intérêts. Je vais m'en arrêter là, puisque je crois que je me répète par rapport à ce que mes prédécesseurs ont dit. Je voudrais revenir quand même sur un aspect qui n'est pas assez mis en exergue. Ce sont les challenges. C'est facile d'adopter, de prendre une décision de oui, nous adoptons les bonnes pratiques de laboratoire de l'OMS, nous adoptons les bonnes pratiques de fabrication de l'OMS, etc., etc. Mais il se pose un véritable challenge, c'est celui de la mise en œuvre effective, celui de l'application effective, qui demande souvent des ressources humaines, qui demande souvent de la formation continue pour le maintien des compétences. Je crois que l'OMS nous accompagne avec également des documents, des frameworks pour la formation aux sciences réglementaires, des toolkits pour la formation autour des produits médicaux de qualité inférieure et falsifiée. L'OMS a sorti récemment un excellent document auquel nous avons contribué qui permet à tous les niveaux de la chaîne de valeur du médicament de former les acteurs à mieux lutter contre les produits médicaux de qualité inférieure et falsifiée. Je voudrais revenir sur un challenge qui nous préoccupe souvent et je crois que ça doit être le cas dans certains pays, c'est les organisations mondiales avec le référentiel. Vous savez que l'OMD, l'Organisation mondiale des douanes, a sa classification internationale des marchandises. Nous avons l'OMS, nous avons nos définitions du médicament. Et nos distributeurs sont souvent confrontés à cette interprétation de c'est quoi un médicament, c'est quoi un complément alimentaire, et qui fait que les taxes ne sont pas les mêmes. Au Sénégal, le médicament est dispensé de TVA, de taxes. Il n'y a pas de taxe pour rendre cela accessible. Mais les autres produits, les complémentaires, sont taxés à 18%. C'est communautaire. Mais parfois, les conteneurs sont bloqués au port. Pourquoi? Parce que tout simplement, ce que nous considérons nous, comme médicaments ou comme alimentaire n'est pas toujours considéré tel quel par la douane. Et ça fait des conflits, ça fait des difficultés. Et que je crois que dont la solution devrait venir du niveau supra-communautaire et même pourquoi pas au niveau de l'AMA. Je crois que ce sont des chantiers, ce sont des défis que je partage qui devraient être en tout cas pris en compte pour aider à harmoniser. On ne peut pas dans une même administration avoir des interprétations différentes d'un même produit, n'est-ce pas? Oui, le code des douanes est là, mais nous avons également le code de la santé. Et ces deux codes ne doivent pas entrer en conflit. Je crois que l'harmonisation, la standardisation devrait nous permettre d'arriver à cela. Je termine, Président, si vous permettez, avec une autre observation qui fera l'objet d'une présentation tout à l'heure d'un de nos jeunes confrères, Dr Sek, sur la classification des variations. Nous travaillons dans un règlement communautaire de 04-2020 de l'UEMOA. Au niveau de l'Europe, ils sont à une classification A, un B, 2. Nous sommes nous en deux classifications binaires, mineures, majeures, et nous recevons des gènes de celles qui nous viennent de l'Europe avec leur classification et nous devons les évaluer par rapport à notre règlement. Je crois qu'il est important également que nos règlements, que nos référentiels soient régulièrement mis à jour pour permettre un peu de faciliter le commerce international des médicaments et je crois que ça fait partie des sous-thèmes de cette conférence-là. Donc, il y a beaucoup d'autres éléments, mais je vais m'en arrêter là pour ne pas monopoliser la parole en vous remerciant encore une fois de l'invitation. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. That was excellent. Thanks for sharing your views. We'll move to Lodovico from Swissmedic. He's not here. I thought I saw him. Oh, okay. All right. No, that's fine. We'll then move to Kenya. If you could also reflect on the same point, and then I'll give an opportunity for questions from the floor after Pauline's presentation.
Thank you very much. Habari ya asubuhi. This might just be your only chance to learn a Swahili word. That is to say good morning in Swahili. My name is Pauline Wairemo. I am the chair of the African Medical Devices Forum, And here in Kenya, I had the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics section at the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. International standards are at the core of regulation. And I think speaking from the AMDF front, we have had the opportunity to accelerate the work of diagnostics and medical devices in the continent using standards. Luther, I must say that I was hoping I would see something of medical devices in your presentation because I know you follow me on LinkedIn and you've told me a few times you've seen the standards you've adopted. So maybe next time. But let me say that the African Medical Devices Forum is a regional harmonization initiative to the IMDF. That is correct. But our journey there was born out of the need to ensure that alignment of international standards is the language that we could speak. Everything that is not pharmaceuticals is medical devices. So my scope is uniquely different. I don't even think I fit in the regulatory authority I'm in, but we have to do with that because that is the historical nature in which most of the NRAs in this room, where medical devices is a small discussion, well, it actually ought to be the biggest discussion, and I must challenge that. The reason why I believe medical device standards are central is because it's not just one standard. Yes, Alex touched on the ISO 13485, but the standards pertaining to medical devices go beyond to in vitro diagnostics, go beyond to equipments of orthopedics, go beyond to laboratory reagents. Those standards are in the millions, if to give a number. And the use of or duplication is extremely difficult. We do not have, there is not a country in the African continent with the resources or capacity to develop a standard. And that is because it is tedious, the expertise required we do not have, or many of us are struggling, including in my own national regulatory authority. So adopting standards is a smart thing. And so in about 5 years, when I was vice chair and now the chair of the African Medical Devices, we have been able to accelerate and bring to the steering committee, and I'm here with the chair, 8 guidelines that have been able to, we have been able to utilize reliance and use of standards, borrowing from the different working groups of the IMDRF to be able to bring that to the African continent. And that is remarkable. The reason that is important is because alignment of standards, one, stops us or removes duplication. We don't have enough resources, that is loud and clear. So being able to utilize and learn from the expertise outside the African continent is really a smart thing, and that is what we have engaged in. Additionally, I'll speak to maybe the most recent guideline that we did just this last November. Aspects to do with post-market surveillance are critical in medical devices. And many of our NRAs, I know that is a challenge because it is in my own. So we adopted the field corrective notice guideline directly from the IMDRF. And we also do borrow from the World Health Organization, the PMS guideline that was established. So the recognition that aligning to international standards not only elevates the standards we are using, but most importantly, the fragmented nature of regulation of devices in the African continent means that there are countries that do not have standards, there are countries that do not have processes and procedures for medical devices, and therefore making available this document at the continental level automatically means that countries that do not have those documents can be able to access them easily, quickly. And I have evidence because 2 months ago we conducted a webinar, and I can say of the 100 plus participants that attended, we were having the questions of where do we get the guidelines and how can we access them. The guidelines are available in 6 incredible African languages. We understand that language has been a hindrance, language has been a barrier. We have the English speaking, the French speaking, the Portuguese speaking, we have the Arabic speaking in North Africa. You can tell I know my continent and my people well. So this is extremely important. In being able to harmonize and bring standards to the continent, we can then be able to adapt the languages that are suitable for the countries that we represent. And again, that is directly going to speak towards adoption, adaption, and utilization of these standards. Another key point that was spoken to is reliance. and especially in emergencies. Emergencies create unique opportunities and create unique threats that we do not have the luxury of time to think of what to do. That the current or recently announced monkeypox did put our country to serious shift in gears in terms of wanting to do what was important. And as a result, as a continent, we also have a guideline on emergency that also internationally aligned, because we must be able to have a criteria of the most basic of information that we must be able to put in together quickly to be able to respond. Out of that, I am happy to say that we have actually seen the listing of diagnostics, now 3 of them for the African continent, using the guidelines that have been adopted for emergency response. And that is directly helping ourselves to be able to respond adequately to threats, health threats that we know do not announce or do not ask, and they do not care. They just come. So we need to be able to harness that. So stands again help us to be able to do that. Lastly, and most importantly, is that we have been able to see that since the AMDF became a regional harmonization initiative to the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, individual countries have been able to front and be able to move forward with also becoming members. Ghana, our most recent September affiliate member to the IMDRF, and that's an incredible achievement, because it says that even at national level, we want to align to the standards that are going to promote and elevate the way we do medical devices. So I'm really, really happy that hearing the other panelists in the discussion discuss of the removal of duplication of processes, adoption of standards as a mechanism to enable reliance. It is, of course, speaking directly to capacity building, because we have the MDATC and the chair, Emmanuel, is in the room. That technical committee is borrowed from what Ima was saying. We have national regulators from NRAs that we sit and review documents that are then adopted for the continent. So that is going to work towards our capacity building. And importantly, it is helping us to identify key priority areas that set the agenda for the continent. So I believe I have been able to touch on those answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. And you remind me of my senior manager for medical devices. She always makes the same call that we must discuss medical products, which includes devices and in vitro diagnostic tests. With that, we've got a few minutes for questions from the floor. So we will start on that side of the room. If we can have mics just going around. Yes, sir, we see you. The second aisle, any question from you? Going once, twice, gone. This aisle, the middle aisle. Is there oh, yes, we see you over there. Thank you. In the middle here, any question from you? Okay, we'll move to, thank you. We see you over there. The second to last aisle, a question from you. Yes, we see you at the back. And we see the gentleman in the white shirt at the back, at that side. Thank you. So we'll have the mics go around for questions, please. Please indicate which panel member you are addressing.
Okay, thank you. Francisco Songani, Africa Public Health Foundation. Well, I think I addressed to everyone. Thank you. I think this was a very good panel. My suggestion is that we need to do dissemination. It was repeated by the different speakers that what we're discussing here might not be very well known at the country level. I would suggest that we do first thing a sort of a shock of getting all the regulators in one room and address the main issues and the purpose of getting the harmonization. And the second level will do the regional consultations, which were alluded to by different speakers, in order to come to a process of appropriation and ownership by the national regulatory authorities. Because this is the issue, is lack of dissemination of what we're discussing here. I think the example which was shared by EAC, the East Africa community, is quite eloquent as a basis to start this process in terms of regional consultations and come to appropriation point and build the true consensus. And the other element which is missing, I could not emphasize more. The speaker from Kenya put it very well. The medical devices are out. And we have concrete examples of brilliance in Africa through medical devices. The response to COVID-19 and the response to Mpox outbreak, it was based on the lab capacity in order to trace the pandemic and drive the process of illuminating the epidemiologists on where to take the action. The advances which were made in Africa in terms of lab were now with more than 40 labs able to do genomic sequencing, which was the key in order to stop the pandemic process. That is a good example. And the capacity which was built there during the COVID-19 response was the bedrock for the immediate fast response in the Mpox outbreak. So we should capitalize on that. And the lab colleagues are more advanced. They're now harmonizing the procedures, the different technologies they have to introduce in the countries. They need a sort of an accompaniment from the regulatory side in order to allow the new devices to be properly authorized at the country level. We at APHF, of the Public Foundation, we are working with some of the pharmaceutical companies. They have a brilliant initiative with the devices which are effective, accessible, and affordable. And we need to make sure that their job will be facilitated at the country level in order to get the adoption and the authorization by the country. This is the question they ask us so many times. How are we going to deal with the country regulations in order to introduce a particular device? I think this is a very good panel. Congratulations again to the all the NEPAD team and all the organizers. Let us move from this room and disseminate and make this discussion, this thinking, the thinking of the country themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That comment and cautionary is certainly noted. Thank you. And I take that my panel members noted that. We'll move to the second question. Yes, the gentleman at the back. Thank you. And I take that my panel members noted.
Je vais parler en français.
We'll
Hein.
move to the second question. Yes, the gentleman at the back.
Je suis docteur Isaka, je viens du Congo-Brazzaville. J'ai peut-être eu la chance de participer à certaines activités de ARSO. Mais on est en train de parler des normes, on est en train de parler des référentiels et autres. Je crois que l'ARSO est même basé ici au Kenya. Mais jusque-là, je n'ai pas vu la place que ARSO pouvait jouer, le rôle que ARSO pouvait jouer auprès des AMA pour permettre à ce qu'on puisse avoir des normes africaines qui vont peut-être être beaucoup plus adaptées aux conditions de l'Afrique au lieu qu'on ait toujours des normes internationales. Lorsqu'on prend le cas même de l'Europe, même lorsqu'il existe des normes ISO, mais l'Europe a aussi des normes européennes, de l'Union européenne. Donc je crois que je ne le vois pas, en tout cas jusque-là, je n'ai pas entendu parler d'ARSO, qui est même basé ici au Kenya, qui devait certainement jouer un gros rôle parce que les normes africaines peuvent être beaucoup plus adaptées par rapport à la situation africaine. Donc quel est finalement le rôle que ARSO peut jouer autour de AMA pour permettre à ce qu'on ait des normes africaines qui seront certainement beaucoup plus efficaces par rapport à notre contexte. Voilà ma préoccupation. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. If you could clarify what ASO is for those who may not be aware. Or African Regional Standards Organization. Thank you, Pauline. And Pauline, oh, okay. Thank you. Pauline will reflect on that. Thank you for that question. We had a question. Oh, okay. Thank you. Pauline will. Yes, please go ahead now. Thank you for that question. We had a question. Oh, okay. Thank you. Pauline will. Yes, please go ahead now. Thank you for that question. We had a question. Yes, please go ahead now.
I can use, sorry, I thought I cannot use this one. Okay, thank you. I don't exactly know for who it is my question, but I think you will find out. So I'm a little bit confused. We talk about harmonization for a long time. I think it's clear. We should avoid duplication. We should improve reliance. But then I hear a lot of international guidance standards. Even I really like the comment from Dr. Otim for ESC, because even if the international standard from WHO, ICH are close, there is minor change. And when you are an applicant, it's really an issue to find out, to prepare a dossier according to each requirement. So I think linking with what was presented from EMEA, we know what works is one harmonized, one dossier, one template, one standard. So is it an opportunity now for AMA to let's say, implement one standard, taking part of the WHO, top part ICH, but that is one, instead of each country giving the responsibility to each country, and I understand that it's not easy to compare, to consult, etc. If it's not possible, some country will not be able. And then you can implement some local requirement. This is not a big deal, but try to not create a new nightmare. I know WHO standard are not always easy. ICH maybe not easy to understood. So please have a one direction. Listen what was said or done with EMEA. One standard, please. It's really the only way to move. Listen what was said or done with EMEA.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
It's really the only way to move.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Good morning. Thank you so much that I can pose my question. My question is for Lucia and Victoria. Actually, on Monday at the industry engagement session, we spoke specifically about the variations guideline and what is AMA's approach and what can be considered. So just looking specifically at this post-marketing authorization variation guideline, there is currently the IMA guideline and there is currently the WHO guideline. Right, so what would your advice be for NRAs and for AMA to enhance reliance in this regard and to minimize duplication of efforts? Thank you. And for AMA to enhance reliance in this regard and to minimize duplication of efforts. Thank you.
There was a question. There we go.
Good morning, everyone.
There was a question. There we go.
I'm not coming to ask any question, just a contribution. My name is Mariama Sima from Medicines Control Agency, the Gambia. I would like to talk about our experience, reflecting on the topic of the day, that is adoption of the guidelines and SOPs. We at Medicines Control Agencies, as a young agency, we really benefited from the adoption of guidelines and SOPs through a collaboration with Global Health Protection Program funded by the Federal Ministry of Health of Germany through Train project. And before this project, we have few guidelines, I can say about 9 to 10 guidelines. And when we started this project 2019, coming to 2025, we, marketing authorization alone, we have about 17 harmonized guidelines. They are jointly developed with other peer authorities like FDA Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And this has really impacted our regulatory decisions and our functions. And it was also through this collaboration, we had opportunities to conduct self-assessment benchmarking of WHO, GBT, maturity level 3. And 2022, when we conducted this self-benchmarking, we identified major gaps, which we are closely addressed in 2025. It was through this collaboration, those gaps were addressed due to the guidelines that we have adopted from the harmonized 17 guidelines that were jointly developed by other sister agencies together with medicines control agencies. So this has really impacted our regulatory activity, and it has helped us to align with international standards and best practices. Thank you very much, GHPP and the Farm Train Project. We're really grateful for your help, and we say a big thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll accommodate just one more question on that aisle in front. Yes, please go ahead. And then we've got 4 minutes. We need to wrap up to the panel members who will respond.
Thank you for also taking my question. My name is Jochen Auerbach. I'm working for CEPI, Regulatory Affairs. I'm head of Europe, Middle East, and Africa region. And I really followed the discussion on the panel and the presentations with great interest. And we heard a lot about all these international standards, ICH, WHO, EMA, all that is followed by the countries. But I was missing something. There was the AMA Treaty, there was the model law, there was in 2019. And the community led by MRH had really worked a lot on all the, let's say, framework. We have guidelines, but also regulations. Most recently, there was also the discussion at the Medicines Policy and Regulatory Reforms Technical Committee on the regulation for marketing authorization and registration, on the regulation for blood products and blood. And there are guidelines in place you can see at the AMIH website, for example, for lot release, but very importantly, for emergency use listing and for reliance. And all these guidelines should be, I think, and that was the idea, implemented at the national regulatory authorities and the regions. But I haven't really heard about that. Maybe I missed something. And that is, of course, a question to the whole panel. Over. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. I'm going to ask my panel members to please be brief so that we can honor time in their responses. I'll speak to the question on the ASO to say that we will certainly raise this with AMA and have discussions, because one of the things within AMA is capacity building. And we know that on the continent, there's about a handful of countries, if not a bit more, that are ISO compliant. And so I think it is best practice that that would be the case. And so thank you for raising that question. We will then bring it up to AMA. If Luther can maybe respond, there was a very direct question to you. And then there was also another question on, yes, linked to AMA. I don't know if any of my other heads of agencies or Alex can also reflect on that. Thank you, Luther.
Thank you, Chair. And because we are running out of time, what I can just say is the issue of variation is an important one for the reasons that you have mentioned. And we have been having discussions on this in terms of how do we make sure that the variations guideline, not only about, harmonization, but also in terms of countries, how do they take into account the aspect of reliance in variations? Because it should be different. So there's one aspect of just having variation guidelines, but then how do you handle variations in the context of reliance become something slightly different that countries have to be able to address as well. So we are working on that, but thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe before I go into the AMA and one standard, I think the question was the classification of variations. WHO uses a different classification system, and European Medicines Agency, or the European region, uses a different one. So I think she wanted to hear from WHO why is WHO different from that if we are advocating for one standard. But maybe Dr. Gwaza will come back to that. So On AMA having one standard, I think that is the goal of establishment of the African Medicines Agency, to get to a point where we have one common standard on the continent. I think in one of the meetings, if not the industry engagement day, we also discussed the possibility of harmonization of even module 1, because you would find even in module 1, we ask for the same things, but different formats, which is also a very time-consuming process for the industry. I think, and this would be my personal opinion, we'll get to a point where AMA would then consolidate everything globally and say, in the African context, this would be our standard, or will be our approach to certain things. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other panel member that wants to address a question?
Just on the issue of variations, I had also noted in my notes that we were talking this morning about secondments and exchanges of people from one agency to another. We have colleagues from FDA and PMDA in our offices. We were talking this morning about sending someone to WHO for a couple of weeks. And I noted in my notes, maybe the issue of variation should be one that we can discuss. I don't think we are that different. One of the differences is that the EMA is very thorough, and maybe we are too thorough and we want to know everything. But when you are adopting our requirements, you also need to think, do you really need to know anything? There are some minor variations that maybe you don't want to receive, because we also hear from countries that are adopting our full variation guidelines, and then they say, how do you manage backlog? Because this is too much, we cannot receive all this. So I think WHO is a bit more clever than us, in a sense that they are not asking for everything. But for what we are asking, we'll be working together on trying to see how we harmonize better our approaches. So you want to think how thorough you want to be and how detailed do you really need to see everything. Thank you.
And then on the issue from SEPI, I can say that for Ghana, we have rectified the model law. However, the legal processes, the legislative processes takes time. At the moment, the FDA law sits within the Public Health Act. So now there are consultations within the ministry whether we should make the model law a separate law for FDA Ghana, or it should be incorporated into the Public Health Act. And these are things that takes a lot of time. So I think with these guidelines coming from AMRH, and because of our legal frameworks, our constitutions of our various countries, it will eventually take some time before it reflects within the individual countries. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick one to emphasize what was mentioned by one of the colleagues, dissemination. I think this should be one of the easiest thing, because technology now permits us. If there's a website, for example, it should be easier for somebody to put the guidelines there for the stakeholders, because the guidelines are there for the stakeholders. And then the other thing was what was mentioned, that you have ICH, WHO, then I think there's an opportunity for MRH at the REX. So if, for example, there is a guidelines which are adopted at the REX, then we need to encourage the countries to do the same. Because if you look at the number of regulatory authorities, it's such every country has a regulatory authority. So even if they had the capacity to develop their own guidelines, it would be a chaotic world for the stakeholders who need to use the guidelines. So I think we need to consider that, but also, especially with overlapping membership of the REX, for example, the EAC and GAD. Again, I think we need to think about how we could have one guideline cutting across REX, especially with overlapping membership. Because now, if, for example, we have the EAC guidelines, you find that the Republic of Kenya is a member of the EAC, also a member of IGAD. So if you are from Kenya, what guideline do we apply? EAC or IGAD? So I think we need to encourage the REC so that we can be able to find a way of having guidelines cutting across RECs, and that will also enhance reliance, REC to REC reliance. Thank you.
I think mine is quite simple. medical devices and in vitro diagnostics are not going anywhere. And I made sure they're in the AU model law. So we are going to only have this discussion more, and we are going to ensure that regulatory convergence has and includes medical devices. Thank you.
I'm not sure if our colleague from Senegal wants to say something to conclude. Finished.
Merci. Temps de latence pour mettre les casques. Voilà, donc je pense que ces échanges montrent toute l'actualité et la pertinence des questions qui ont été soulevées. Et je crois que l'OMS est un acteur clé. Et dans ce processus d'optimisation, d'harmonisation, il y a des voies accélérées, notamment la CRP. Nous recevons beaucoup de demandes de variations, mais nous reconnaissons, nous essayons de classer, de comparer les variations selon le classement EMEA par rapport à notre règlement 04. Et nous faisons un travail quand même d'interprétation, d'évaluation qui nous prend un peu de temps, qui aurait pu aller plus vite si on avait réussi quand même à faire des tableaux d'alignement comparatifs. Je crois que c'est une question qu'il va falloir adresser. Nous la vivons au quotidien. C'est ce qui explique que j'ai eu à poser cette question, mais également la définition des produits de santé harmonisés à tous les niveaux. Par rapport à la loi modèle, je crois que pour CEPI, c'est une loi fondatrice, n'est-ce pas, de la main. Et pour ce qui nous concerne, nous sommes en train d'élaborer notre code de la santé publique, le véritable code de la santé post-indépendance. Et nous sommes en train d'intégrer toutes ces modifications quand même qui découlent de ces textes qui datent d'un peu plus longtemps. Donc, Président, ce que je voudrais dire, ce sont des réflexions. Nous n'avons pas les réponses exactes, mais je crois que ça suscite des questionnements, ça suscite des réflexions que l'équipe de AMA, Alex, Chim et tous les autres vont certainement noter dans les agendas pour les échanges ultérieurs. Merci.
Thank you so much to our panel members. I mean, some of them have already concluded on what are some of the takeaways, but it's clear from this conversation that we need to have more discussions around standards, around harmonization. I think it's easy for us to say we have harmonized guidelines, but it's clear that when we go into the intricacies, classification of products, which are some of the questions that came on the online platform, classification of variations, etc., that there's a lot more still to be done. So I would recommend that under AMA, we have a session with a range of stakeholders on this. Linked to that, quite important, and my recommendation would be for us as NRAs to really consider being members, whether affiliate members or associate members to ICH, VICH, IMDRF, etc., PICs, so that we can also influence and contribute to the development of those guidelines, because we do adapt and adopt them. So just to urge more of us NRAs to participate them. A comment that also came through quite a lot, even on the questions online, is around building capacity on compliance of standards and development of standards, and not only for the NRAs, but even for industry. So let's keep that in mind. But with that said, I think this is certainly an important conversation that cannot stop here. We need to continue. So with that said, I'd like to thank my panel members for all the insights that they have shared with us. And before we take a picture, I'll hand over to Alex to guide us on what next.
Thank you. Can you share the screen? Yes, so we'll now go into panel sessions. The first sessions will be the ones that were supposed to be done yesterday evening. Panel 10, Mantra Bay, as you can see, which is Mantra Bay and Barracuda. They're on that side. Arabuko is this one. I think this is session on the lions. And then we'll take a 15 minutes coffee break. and we'll continue the parallel sessions until lunch. Then after lunch, we all come back to this main conference room where we'll have the last plenary, which is plenary 3, and we'll then close the conference, SCoMRA 2025. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very efficient.
Thanks for this. Let's practice for 1 minute. And maybe we get contact time again.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I ask you to take your conversations out of the room on your way to your plenary session? If they are in the room, can I invite the speakers and presenters for the next session, that is parallel session 12, to come to the stage? Just so we can get going. Is there an order for this? Wherever you want to. Yes. Yes. DJ. Your job. DJ. DJ. So DJ. Yes, Dr. DJ. Yes. Yes. Be my DJ. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting the plenary parallel session 12 in the next minutes. So if the colleagues from IFPMA could take their conversation out of the room or sit down, that would be wonderful. Yes. Wherever you want to. Yes. Please come and sit down. Hi. Okay. Right. Rasha, you're there. Right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Realizing that this parallel session stands between us and your tea break. If the people at the back of the room could make their way to Barracuda and Manta Bay. Okay, we're going to start regardless. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having chosen what I think is probably the most interesting of the 3 parallel sessions running this morning. It's set, we're going to run it for about an hour and a quarter. I know it says an hour and a half, but we're already late. And we're going to try and keep the conversations crisp and to the point, especially since this stands between us and our tea break at midday. We have 3 presentations, lead presentations, and 3 abstracts presentations this morning. Time management will be key, looking to the colleagues. And I know the speakers will be mindful of that, and I will have a timer on my phone that will sound a loud reminder 1 minute before the end. To business. Probably the buzzword of the conference has been reliance this week. And this session, what we aim to do with this fascinating panel is to put a little bit of meat on the bone of what that actually means and what it looks like in practice. So, but one thing before we do start is we keep saying the word reliance. And I'd quite like us to think in different terms and to start thinking in terms of informed regulatory reliance. It's 3 words instead of 1, but I think, as we'll hear from WHO later, it is really much the way we need to start thinking about it. Informed regulatory reliance. And the theme of each of the presentations we're going to have is about leveraging assessments from other trusted regulatory authorities to enhance efficiency, reduce duplication, and promote timely access to quality medicines across the continent. So what I'm going to do is we have the 6 panelists. We have David Wallace-Simbi from Auda NAPAD, previously from the Ugandan National Agency, and he's going to be speaking about the Continental Regulatory Reliance Framework. We have Dr. Selma Dijeng, who is the Chief Executive of the Botswana National Agency, SCoMRA. He has a long list of achievements, but the highlights he brings to this particular discussion is his role as chair of the Zazibuna Coordinating Committee. And in his own words, he's inching towards ML3 recognition. And he's going to be speaking about SCoMRA's own experience of regulatory reliance. We have Nyasha Maragere, currently with WHO HQ in Geneva and the Special Access Program. And she'll be speaking about the WHO Good Reliance Practice Guidance. And hopefully you'll bring up this comment about informed regulatory reliance. She's nodding at me, good. We have 3 abstracts, which talk about some practical implementation. We have Mario Masunda, also from WHO HQ Geneva, who's going to bring us some experience about the PQ program. And he's going to talk about the framework for improving regulatory reliance From Bayer, we have Peter Odiambo and John sorry, I've miswritten it here. Mwangi, they'll be speaking about a practical case study of regulatory reliance here in Kenya. And the last presentation is from Keji Hunu, who's the Exec Secretary of the Regional Committee for Harmonization of Pharmaceutical Regulation at the West African Economic Monetary Union, UEMWA. And she'll be speaking about practical reliance experience, particularly in the case of less well-resourced NRAs, in this case, Guinea-Bissau, Niger, Mali, and Togo. So with that, I'm going to hand over, please, to Mario, who I believe has the first presentation. Okay, I've got it in the wrong order here. Yes, sorry, it's David. Please. That's the danger of putting things on your iPads 2 days before the session starts. I haven't adjusted to it. So David, over to you.
Thank you, Hadi. Good morning, everyone. I'll be speaking about the Continental Regulatory Reliance Framework that we have developed and trying to disseminate it to different countries and region economic communities. Okay, to begin with, since I'm the first speaker, I need to paint a picture of what we mean when we talk about reliance. Here, we're mainly focusing at a regulatory authority in one jurisdiction, taking into account and giving significant weight the assessments performed by another regulatory authority or trusted institution in reaching its own decision. So it can be whole, taking into account the whole decision, or it can rely part of the decision. But the critical thing to note here is that the relying authority remains independent, responsible, and accountable for the decision that has been made. So why do we need reliance? And why are we proposing it as a solution? So in Africa, we have limited technical resources, and so we need to optimize these resources by relying and avoid duplication of the work that has already been done by another authority. And also because we have a lot of fragmentation, we need to embrace reliance mechanisms so that we can reduce on the duplication of the efforts. There are many principles for reliance, as my colleague from the WHO will shed more light on this. But maybe I want to emphasize that a few of them, principles like universality, which means that reliance is not only applicable to low resource environments or jurisdiction, that even the highly resourced agencies, they also do reliance, as we will see later. Also, the principle of the relying institution remaining sovereign. They are responsible for the decision that has been made. And also, the relying institution has to have competent individuals for them to be able to reach to a decision on which they're relying on. So, but the most important of these principles is that there has to be trust and confidence between the institution that is relying to the institution that is providing the reliance. So we've had multiple problems on the continent, some of which I've talked about, things like disparities in capacity, and we previously didn't have a continental framework, And also, there are so many legal gaps in the regulatory laws that we are having on the continent. But of course, we have addressed this by coming up with the AU model law that provides for reliance under different articles. So we want to also optimize the little resources that we have so that we avoid the duplication of efforts. So the continental framework. Now, I want to talk about the continental framework that we came up with. So it is a unifying template that is providing a comprehensive adaptive template so that reliance practices can be harmonized. And we want regulatory authorities, whether you're ML1 or ML3, with reliance, we can improve regulatory efficiency so that we can have a similar output, regardless of whether you're ML1 or ML3. So the continental framework has been anchored in AMA, and as we are moving towards AMA, so I mean, we launched it yesterday, so we're already in the AMA era, so the reliance practices have been anchored in the AMA framework. And so the principle upon which AMA is taking shape, reliance is one of the most important principles. So the key objectives that are under this, what that were based on in coming up with this framework. One, we wanted to streamline the regulatory processes so that we can avoid duplication and create more efficient pathways. We want to accelerate access to medicines so that by reducing the timelines, we also want to build capacity and strengthen confidence of the national regulatory authorities. And then we also want to promote cohesion among the regulatory authorities. The framework has been embedded in 3 pathways, the most important of which being verification. And with verification, we emphasize that the relying agency has to conduct what we call the sameness, product sameness, to ensure that there's an issue with this. So to ensure that the product upon which you're applying the reliance principles is the same product in terms of characteristics. The product characteristics are the same with the product that was submitted to the agency upon which you're relying on. And then the second principle is an averaged review. The second pathway is an average review where you mainly conduct partial reviews that are focusing on the critical elements, but you focus on the critical elements of the report. You don't have to do the entire review process because this has already been done by the agency where you're getting this information from. And there is an issue. Okay, sorry. And the last principle is recognition, which involves full recognition of the decision that has already been made by the agency from which the relying agency is getting this information, or the trusted agency. So this applies to all it applies to all the regulatory functions, be it GMP inspections, be it market authorization, clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, quality control. But for now, we had not included medical devices because we looking at having a separate pathway for the medical devices. And oh, okay, I've been given 1 minute. Let me try to rush through this. So the framework recognizes multiple reference institutions that were involved in coming up with this framework. We benchmarked with the WHO listed authorities, the technical committees, the REC initiatives, and the more mature authorities that we have on the continent. So we have multiple enablers for the reliance framework, the most important of which being the AU model law, which in Article 27 and Article 28, reliance principles have been embedded there. We've also developed operational guidelines to guide countries in implementing reliance frameworks. We have also standardized templates for data sharing between multiple countries. And also we have developed different digital infrastructure like the RIS, PRIMS, which will enable information sharing between multiple institutions. What are the benefits that we're looking at? We're looking at improving access to medical products. We also want to reduce the workload. We also want to build capacity of the institutions. And also we're looking at greater convergency. That this has already been discussed in a previous plenary session. So I will just skip it and go to the next. So, of course, there are implementation challenges. Implementing reliance means some countries think that maybe their sovereignty is being overrun, but we are trying to build confidence with these countries and letting them know that you're still responsible for the decision, so you remain sovereign. And there are also issues with data confidentiality. So we are trying to establish secure protocols and for information exchange. Also capacity disparities between different institutions or regional mechanisms. So as we address this, for example, in the regional processes for review, we're trying to have some regions second experts while other regions are doing assessment so that we can have them be as observers in their reviews to be part of, to build that confidence among different regions.
Thank you very much, David. You need to finish, or how much have you got left?
Like 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Three.
Another 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you short, though, because otherwise we're not going to have a chance to hear from everybody else and have
All
time for
right.
questions.
So this is an example of how reliance is being implemented at a global scale, like the ICH, PICS, and this was. So as I conclude, I want to dispel the common misconceptions about reliance. One, reliance does not mean that you're providing less stringent oversight, because you remain you remain the one responsible for the decision. It does not eliminate local capacity. And reliance does not mean that your institution is being compromised, your independence. And also, it is not just for low-resourced countries. Even the high-income countries do reliance, like we've seen in the previous slide. I could not explain more on that because of time. So as I conclude, I want to say that reliance is not just a tool used by low-resourced regulatory authorities. It is equally relevant for the world WHO-listed authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I'm glad I gave you the chance to have that last presentation about dispelling the myths. So the next we have Dr. Dijeng, the CEO of the Botswana National Agency. And he's going to be talking about his own experience as a head of national agency about their implementation of regulatory reliance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is C. Madijeng. As indicated, I'm the CEO of the Botswana Medicines Regulatory Authority. I've already donated my 3 minutes to David, so I will try and make this a very quick run through. The case for reliance, I think, has been made very clearly. I think the session that we just had before is quite an important one in terms of the guidelines, adoption of international guidelines. And I think when you base your reliance on the adoption of international standards, it becomes very easy because then you trust that what you're looking at has some similarity. So quickly, I think I'll jump to the SCoMRA journey just quickly. SCoMRA is an entity that was established in 2018 through an act of parliament, the Medicines and Related Substances Act of 2013. We have moved on because our founding strategy as an agency was to achieve maturity level 3. So we've been carrying out assessments through GBT since we established the entity. And through that, we've been able to review and refine, modernize our law, aligning with the AU model law, as well as, of course, as I said, from the interaction that we've had with the GBT. So I'm happy to report that I think as we are here, there is a parliamentary sitting in Botswana that is going to be considering our revised legislation that is driving our maturity level aspirations. Sorry, let me go forward. Yeah, so in terms of the reliance journey, our reliance journey, again, it precedes the age of the authority because we were regulating medicines through the Ministry of Health unit called the Drug Regulating Unit. And through this is where we started to see elements of reliance. We are a resource constrained entity. And I think with those challenges early on, as we were regulating medicines, we needed to find ways to still provide medicines to our population. Access was important. And we knew that because we did not have the technical expertise adequate to deal with the demand of access in our country, that we needed to start reliance there. So that transitioned. Of course, I think initially we were only looking at product evaluation for registration of medicines. But it transitioned as we went into establishing SCoMRA to try and work at broadening our reliance scope. So as part of our strategic goal, right from the beginning, as I said, we set ourselves to achieving maturity level 3 in 5 years. It was an ambitious goal. It remains an ambitious goal, but that is where we started. We knew that we could not do this if we were not going to incorporate elements such as reliance or principles such as reliance into how we do our work, because then we will not be able to demonstrate and indeed, as I said, facilitate the access to medicines that we wanted to achieve. So we were not looking at a blue ocean type of strategy in terms of this aspiration. We had to work with what has already been done by others. Oops. Apologize there. So I think in seeking to optimize reliance and broaden, as I said, we started with market authorizations. We then, I think, engaged, because if you come up with a strategy, you must then have implementation plans. You must have strategic initiatives that are going to drive the objectives that you set for yourself. So we sought assistance from the AUDA-NEPAD to work on a framework, a regulatory reliance framework, which is really the bedrock of where now, as we journey forward, are going to be basing our work on reliance through that. So through that, we sought to optimize reliance-based reviews. We wanted to look at more broadly GMP inspections, bring in vigilance as part of this as well. And I think even in terms of the laboratory, we've also gone to that area. But I think really, where we are coming from, the scope of the entities that we relied on was quite narrow. We were only looking at WHO, CRP, Zazibona, of course, some, SRAs, now WLAs. But more recently now, because we have established MOUs with other entities, ML3 entities within the continent in particular, we see that as an opportunity now to, broaden that and ensure that we incorporate within these MOUs some, agreements that relate to reliance. We want to be able to get the, reports to be able to use this, because after all, we work together. We work together at the reg level. We work together at AMA level. Our experts, traverse that space. So it makes sense that we move in that direction. I think here is just to share the sort of models that we've adopted over the years, and as we increasingly bring reliance on board, it's information sharing, recognition is one of the ones that we've used. We do joint sharing, joint work sharing, or joint work. We have relied on regional and international structures or entities. And I think with the lab, we are seeing more that as well. We go with your wholesale sort of outsourcing of certain testing. But I think here now I'm just quickly demonstrating to you the way that we have seen Reliance work for us. So here is with GMPs. You will see that from 2023, 2024, we have about, well, it's not in percentage, but you will see that we have relied in terms of the desk assessments. We've done desk assessments that, were pretty much based on reliance. And we have also done some GMP or reviews that were based on reliance as well. I think now, I think this slide speaks to what is currently pertaining in Botswana. We have a state of emergency where we are not, we don't have medicines in public facilities. And therefore, we have a lot of medicines that are coming into the country as donations that are coming into the country or procurement that is done on agency. And out of that, we have been able to use reliance across, I think, about 52 facilities, which supplied 209 products. We could have not been able to, do this in the urgent nature that we are dealing with if we were not deploying reliance in doing some of this. So I think this is like a real example of what is actually happening in terms of our experience with reliance and how we continue to utilize that. Here, I think, is just an indication of market authorization applications that we've received over the years. It is to say, well, look, the staffing of our organization has not changed over the years, but we are receiving a lot of applications. We need to deal with them. We've reduced our timelines for market authorization. For us to be able to do this, we have to incorporate this certainly as something that, is part of our daily work. Here, I'm just reflecting on, say, AMA-based reliance. 5 applications were received in Botswana from the AMA pilot. 5 of them have been registered all within a week. Zazibona, we are now seeing, I think, timelines of about 60 days to register medicines that are approved through Zazibona through the centralized process. 24 days CRP applications. Medical devices, pretty much 100% since 2024 has been based on reliance. I think the benefits have been stated earlier by David. They are similar. We are seeing that our timelines have been reduced as just indicated there. So I won't dwell on this too much because I've already donated my time, as I said. But I think what is important, perhaps, is that there is the fear, and I think Wayne spoke about this under GMP, that you cannot, well, I think there's an issue of capacity building. And for sure, for a small regulator or a new regulator that is still seeking to build capacity, you want to be able to balance your adoption of reliance with building capacity. That can still be done, in my view. And in particular, if you look at our situation where we work with Zazibona, you are relying, but you are also sending your people in on the work that is done within that platform. So you are kind of winning in that you are also able to build capacity as you do that. But if you don't have that opportunity, you can still be able to say, well, look, out of so many applications that we are dealing with, we will rely on a certain percentage of them and then dedicate some qualifying, of course, applications to go through Reliance. So I think I'll stop here, moderator. Thank you for your audience. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Actually, I think there were some really good practical examples there about what an NRA can do to step forward to go through that journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're going to hand over now to the last of the lead presentations from Nyasha Madageri, who is a consultant at the WHO HQ in the Special Access Programs team. And she's going to be speaking about the WHO Good Reliance Practices Guidance. Over to you. And I will have the timer running.
Okay, I promise Martin that I will try to stick to the time. So I will start by saying something in case he rushes me. If I do not finish my presentation, there's an email at the end of the presentation, and you can always get in touch with us for more information. So while I wait for my slides, my name is Nyasha. I'm a consultant within the Special Access Program, and I'm a product of 2 NRAs in this room. And also in another life, I was Zazibonasis, and I'm mentioning it strictly because for me, it is, yes, okay. So strictly, I'm just mentioning it to say Reliance for me is a lived experience. It's something I've been doing for years. So I'll just take 30 seconds to just introduce the team that I come from. So Special Access Program is within the Regulation and Safety Unit within WHO, and it's relatively new. It's what you might have known as Facilitated Product Introduction. Some of us know us as the CRP team, and it's led by Marie Valentine. We support member states with implementation of reliance mechanisms such as the CRP, which I've mentioned, as well as the Global Health Product Procedures, EUM for All by EMA colleagues, and Swissmedic MHHP. So reliance, what is reliance? I won't get into really what is reliance. We know what it is. You're taking into account you're putting significant weight on a decision that has been made by another regulatory authority, but the relying authority remains independent, responsible, and accountable for the decision that they're making. Why reliance? There's products crossing borders. We have increasing complexity of supply chains. We have new products coming in. So reliance to us is smart and efficient regulation. And what we promote is informed reliance, that ideally the regulators should have the information that they need to make regulatory decisions. When we just to look at the global status of the national regulatory authorities, we know that good reliance practices are anchored in good reliance practices are anchored in good regulatory practices, and the WHO GBT has indicators that actually assist you in incorporating reliance into your processes. And also, they provide a transparent and evidence-based system for you to choose which regulatory authorities you will rely on. So your WLAs, if you're going to rely on, you know that they are there because they have provided evidence that they meet the mark. When we look at concepts of reliance, so first of all, there are many shapes and forms of reliance. We've spoken about them in the last couple of days. We have work sharing, which is what joint assessments essentially are. We have unilateral, we have mutual recognition. So there's a whole spectrum. So it's not all or none. It's like on the other extreme, you have recognition. On one extreme, you have maybe relying on one element. And it's applicable to all regulatory functions and throughout the product life cycle. And what we promote is that NRAs should take a risk-based approach. So you would rather focus your resources on products that may be high risk, which no one else has looked at. This slide is just meant to show some examples of reliance. So the key thing is that reliance is not new. We even have the WHO Certificate of Products, Pharmaceutical Products Scheme, where we get the COPP. And also just to let you know that the WHO pre-qualification team also practices reliance. They rely on assessments that have been made by EMA, for example, as well as other WLAs. So I'd like to just zone in on two examples of reliance. The first one is the collaborative registration procedure. So this is just to show you how many products that have already been approved by using this process. So it's a mechanism that WHO facilitates where we share access to reports that have been generated by either the pre-qualification team or the WLAs so that regulatory authorities can make a regulatory decision within 90 working days. At least that is the target. And just to let you know that of the African countries, we have 42 countries that are already participating in this procedure in the different pathways. So that already shows you that it's not a new concept on the continent. We have been implementing reliance on this continent. And out of all these product approvals, over 900 are from the African continent. And also just to mention that the collaborative registration procedure started in 2012. And we still have more and more pathways coming on board. So again, reliance is not new. So my second example really is we're seeing that there's an increasing use of reliance in pack management as shown by some industry-led pack pilot projects on pack approval. I believe, again, my colleagues from EMA even in a better position to share more information on some of these. But what we are seeing is that several countries are actually accepting the same data package that has been submitted to the WLAs, and they are making an informed decision using the reports or evidence of approval. So we really hope that the lessons learned from this can even be implemented to make sure that there are no product shortages due to delayed pack approval. So I won't really go into the principles of reliance, all of them, but I just want to zone in on two. The first one is universality. I think David spoke about it, that it can be applied by all NRAs. It's not a weakness. Reliance is not a weakness. We know that even the WLAs, they are implementing reliance. And then the other one that I need to just focus on is that there has to be a regulatory basis for you to apply reliance. So this is another way also where the GBT is very important because it can actually guide you as you update your legal framework to implement reliance. And then as far as recommendations go, I just have a few recommendations. So the first one is it's voluntary. So it's up to NRAs. There's a need for a change of mindset. Like I mentioned before, it's not a weakness. You are just trying to be as efficient as possible. And it's important to start small. So you can learn by doing. You can have, even if it's pilots, you can try something out, see if it works, if you need to tweak, and then you can tweak. Harmonization is a facilitator. There was a discussion on harmonization in the morning. There also has to be flexibility in your approach. So you have to be as flexible as possible. And what is also important is the exchange of best practices. In this room, we have countries, NRAs that are already implementing reliance. This is an opportunity to exchange what works, what doesn't work, and then you can make your own decision. As far as resources are concerned, there are several resources on reliance implementation. So the links are on the slides as well. We have the good regulatory practices and the good reliance practices guideline. So please feel free to go through these. We also have a good reliance practice course available on our website. And I'm hoping this is my last slide. So like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us.
Thank you very much, Nyasha. I think the nice points we make here is that reliance is not a weakness. I think that's a really important takeaway message from that. Thank you for that. So we now pass from the lead presentations to presentation of our 3 abstracts, and the first one of which is from Maria Masunda, also at WHO HQ. You've got it there.
Minutes. OK, thank you. Bonjour. Alors, on fait en français, non? La suite. Oui ou non? OK. Moi, je vais faire en français. I just wanted to get your attention. All right, so I want to make a disclaimer. My name is Mario Msonda. I work with the World Health Organization pre-qualification team. As I'm standing here, I'm speaking as a student and sharing a research. So the views expressed in this presentation are my own, and they do not reflect the position of what Nyasha was saying from WHO. So if you have anything against this, you can see me, myself, and I'll be able to explain myself there. So I don't want to waste too much time, but I'll try to share as much as I can. So this is the presentation I want to share with you at sort of the beginning of what we're trying to do with Zambia. So my focus of this study is to institutionalize reliance, informed reliance. So it is not about focusing on a project or on a program as CRP or the program as Zazibona, but an institutionalized program, which is part of the agency. So what are we doing then? So how we're moving with this is that we already know, and I will not discuss this part because we know the problems and challenges of, limited resource settings. I know that even high income, they have challenges, but at least in this case for this part. And what we are looking at is to see how reliance-based regulatory frameworks, different ones as already been discussed, could be institutionalized, not could just be used as tools, but could become part of the arsenal of an NRA. So this study is obviously looking at developing this framework on a practical perspective, and then we'll see how we can validate that it actually delivers what it's supposed to do, similarly to maybe what they try and are doing in Botswana. So this is based on a simple concept, using implementation research as a theory guiding this. What are we saying? We know that SCoMRA is within the inner setting where we have implementation as a proven concept with reliance, and there is some information which I will share with you that it is true, it can work. And then we also have outer setting. But in this study, we're not looking at outer settings. We don't want to discuss issues with manufacturers or issues with other NRAs. I'll be looking with my team on what is it that within SCoMRA that they're able to control, that they can control, and which they should be able to do that. So this is based on a series of methods, multi-methods. Basically, it's been developing and building on a scoping review that we've done to really prove that reliance globally is working. There are some challenges globally, but they are not all applicable to SCoMRA. So we know that even as we say these challenges, there are facts that some challenges really don't exist in other countries. In some countries they do. And then we'll also be looking at SCoMRA's performance review for the last 10 years using reliance to establish a baseline. So then we can know if what we try as an intervention will actually work. So this will be done with a questionnaire survey, of course, and also some other documentation review and also system review of the RIMS to see how that will work. And then after that, we'll try and put this framework together, having a sort of policies, a sort of tools, and we use it in real time prospectively as a cohort, looking at pathways so we can be able to actually objectively compare reliance with all the other pathways that exist in the arsenal for Zambia. So this is a pure simple study with 2 arms looking at all qualitative side, trying to establish first the baseline. And then with this, we're looking at document analysis, we're looking at some survey, and also after that, we'll complement that with a performance review of the last 10 years to establish a baseline. And then with that, it will give us a very good footing on where we're starting from, and then see what we need to do in this framework and also what we need to work on. We don't want to propose a framework simply because there are problems everywhere. We want to propose a framework which is contextualized and should be able to address SCoMRA's specific contextual issues. So what have we done then? We've done a scoping review globally to update the information on actually what are the benefits, what are the impact of reliance globally. And we did this review with a team looking at publications from 2014. Basically, this is because also when WHO CRP started, so we wanted to just be within the more recent time, and then also we use other tools such as the JBI framework to support this. So what have we done? What we found that from the 165 studies we were able to include, well, 15 met the criteria in this review. And we also noticed that particularly in the period between 2021 and 2024, there are a lot of publications, a lot of studies with primary data on impact, primary data on benefits. And also we noticed that in Africa, particularly East Africa and Southern Africa, there are a lot of publications around benefits and impact of reliance. However, these were also fragmented, some in functional area, just as marketing authorization, or some specifically for certain products. So also we noticed that they contained the three main pathways or models, which were verification, abridged, and recognition. I like that they already aligned to the continental framework. So this is what we saw. Then the benefits were quite interesting, that would see actual quantified benefits up to 70% reduction in terms of timelines review. So this is not making an abstract comment to say the timelines improve. Actually, we had a real observation there, including savings on resources up to 80%. So these are real benefits with real numbers. And also we had observed some regulatory capacity improvements, some in clinical evaluation, some in benefit risk assessments. And then we also noticed that there were a lot of improvements in harmonization as an enabler. So what we found is that reliance really works, and also that globally this works. So we've borrowed those, and then we're trying now to bring them down to Zambia to say what really applies to Zambia. So from this baseline, we are able to see the challenges that persist in LMICs and also which are in Zambia. And then also want to build on the critical success factors. So one is a strong legal framework. Of course, in our framework, not everything will be addressed. We'll look at what is feasible, we'll look at what is possible, and also look at what is practical, not just what should be done. And one of the things we want to do is to improve, for example, the RIMS, so that it's capacitated, aligned to deal with reliance on its own, rather than a side project. So the next steps for what we're doing, which I'll be gladly sharing in the next conference, will be the result of what we'd have done with this framework. Basically to see and share with you the real impact that we've done in Zambia and the benefits and how Zambia would have institutionalized this framework, and also some of the cross-pollination and cross-cutting benefits, including its use in medical devices and other products. So basically how it will be able to getting recommendations from AMA, recommendations from ML3 and others as an institutionalized approach. So thank you so much. I hope I'm on time.
Brilliant timekeeping. Thank you, Mario. We seem to have lost one of our speakers. However, we've gained another. Is she here? Is Keji here? Ah, okay, great. So you're not on quite yet, but so we're going to turn now to Peter Odiambo and John Mwangi from Bayer. They're next up, and they're going to talk about their experience from an industry perspective of regulatory reliance here in Kenya. This is going to be a first for SCoMRA. We're going to have a dual presentation who are not going to exceed their allotted time.
Okay.
You may have got the hints there.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Peter Odiambo. I work in regulatory affairs for Bayer. I take care of East Africa, West Africa, and Central Africa. So we are going to tag team. This presentation between myself and John. So I'll take between 3 to 4 minutes to present the findings from our survey, Then John will spend the remaining 3 or so minutes. So, right, so I want to define what regulatory reliance is. Yeah, that has been done by the previous presenters, but it's noteworthy to mention that Kenya, through the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, formally adopted reliance in 2020. In order to assess, like Martin said, the experience of the industry or the users of reliance, we decided to do a scoping survey with a view of assessing their awareness, their understanding, their perception, and the level of uptake of reliance, and also to hear their success stories, the enablers of the success stories, and also the challenges. So we did a scoping survey that targeted the players within the broader healthcare industry. This was done in three parts. So we first did the survey, noted our findings, then later on did focus group discussions and a workshop on reliance. So we sent out the survey, and as you can see, we not only targeted R&D type of companies who are members of CAPI and also MEDAC, but we also targeted local manufacturers through the Federation of Kenya Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, manufacturers of generic products, and we also targeted professionals in the space. So you can see we targeted people in regulatory affairs, medical doctor or members of the Kenya Medical Association, and also other players within the general Kenya healthcare space who are members of Kenya Healthcare Federation. So when we asked them about their understanding of what regulatory reliance was, you can see 92% indicated that they, of course, were aware of what regulatory reliance is, and another 92% were somewhat familiar or very familiar with this principle. Then we asked them what if they had used reliance before, and half of the participants or the respondents in that survey indicated that they had used regulatory reliance. And at this point, it's very important to put the disclaimer that this is the industry view, and this data that does not in any way, indicate the actual number of applications that have been done, at the health authority side. So this was just the industry view. So half of them had used reliance, and on my left, you can see that a lot of them used East Africa Community Joint Assessment Procedure the most, and the other on the extreme right represent mostly reliance that was used for GMP inspections. It's also noteworthy, and the WHO team is here, that there's quite a good uptake for the collaborative registration procedures, as you can see with WHO PQ and also WHO SRA. Also, it's noteworthy to mention that IGAD joint assessment was the least used route, and I'm happy that since our dissemination of these results and the workshop, we've had industry awareness session on the use of IGAD. And we are hoping that now with that session, we'll see a lot more users embracing IGAD joint assessment. Also, as you can see, ESC joint assessment is the most used pathway, and that tells you the important role the MRH, the REX are still playing, and I'm hoping, even with the official launching of AMA, that the REX will still be empowered, because users have very good experiences with the REX. So we asked them the kind of applications that they'd used with Reliance, and you can see marketing authorization is still the leader, followed by regulatory inspections. We noted very limited use of Reliance in lab release, lab testing and lot release, and also pharmacovigilance and vigilance-related activities. Okay, yeah, so then on the main to take us to the next part.
Thank you very much. I'll be very quick. The message we picked from here, from the we have some few conclusions. And here is what we found out, that there is actually a positive trend when it comes to taking up regulatory reliance, because initially we were worried that we are not doing enough, including as industry. The second one is that this is actually being seen as being very beneficial. We have seen, and we could hear and get it from the focus group discussions, that it's actually saving regulatory time. But we also picked something else, that we need to work on the tools that we are using to process regulatory reliance. And we had also in our industry day a discussion around what templates to use, what kind of documents. My colleague had just mentioned about the additional documents. So the form and the things that you need to do to make it work, we picked it as a major barrier. And finally, because this survey was going beyond just the industry and the regulatory agencies, we also picked the need to take this conversation, especially to the users. So we would like to have a conversation where maybe the patient groups, maybe the HCPs, to also understand the value of reliance as an example, because then they can appreciate better the decisions that are coming up and out from the health authority. Finally, we also would like to indicate as one of the recommendations is actually also to clarify on the guidelines, because there are very many iterations around. We are happy from this engagement and would like also to appreciate the support from Pharmacy and Poisons Board. There was actually a review of the existing guideline for reliance, and we look forward to making that work very well. In closing, I just also wanted to highlight something also came up, and this was, we need to have the conversation of what reliance is not versus what reliance is. For example, reliance is not just about saving time, as an example. It's not taking away sovereignty. It's also not tools only for some countries and not for others, and it's not only for certain type of products. It's for products across, but we also picked what could it be if we were using reliance, and we thought that it is important, for example, not to look at it not like it's an experiment anymore, but it is a mainstay thing that we need to do. And with that, I want to close, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John and Peter. Our final speaker, who is equally going to keep to time, and I love the way that she's already taking her iPhone to the podium, and she's going to set her timer, is Keji Hunu, who is Executive Secretary of the Regional Committee for Harmonization of Pharmaceutical Regulation at WEMA.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Je ferai ma présentation en français. Je vais juste confirmer tout ce qui vient d'être dit ce matin sur la reliance et en vous restituant un petit travail que nous avons fait en termes d'application de la confiance réglementaire en situation de fragilité institutionnelle des autorités de réglementation. Ce travail, c'est une petite partie d'un travail que nous avons conduit sur nos 8 États membres, qui sont les 8 États membres francophones de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. L'objectif de ce travail, au départ, l'idée était de voir la situation initiale de laquelle nous partons, parce que nous avions comme projet, et que nous avons toujours d'ailleurs, de renforcer justement la mise en œuvre de la confiance réglementaire dans les États membres de l'UEMOA. Donc, c'est dans ce cadre que nous avons conduit ce travail et la présentation n'est qu'une partie parce que c'est vraiment une analyse croisée de 4 de nos États membres que nous allons vous présenter. Je saisis l'opportunité pour remercier la Fondation Gate et la CEPI qui nous ont accompagnés dans ce travail. L'enquête, comme je l'ai dit, s'inscrit dans le cadre de nos interventions qui visent à améliorer la qualité des médicaments dans les États membres de l'UEMOA. Cela s'inscrit dans le plan stratégique. Tous les intervenants l'ont dit ce matin, la confiance réglementaire est un levier important vraiment pour assurer cette qualité des médicaments, mais surtout pour que nos autorités de réglementation soient plus efficaces, pour que les systèmes de réglementation soient renforcés, mais surtout pour que nous puissions optimiser l'utilisation des ressources que nous avons. Notre objectif était vraiment de mieux appréhender comment nos autorités de réglementation percevaient et appliquaient, expérimentaient la confiance réglementaire, mais particulièrement dans une situation, dans un contexte de fragilité institutionnelle. Notre enquête a été menée sur 4 des États membres, à savoir le Niger, le Mali, le Togo et la Guinée-Bissau. Nous avons élaboré un questionnaire que nous avons testé et sur la base de ce questionnaire, nous avons collecté un certain nombre de données. Il est important de savoir que de façon globale, ces 4 États membres sont de niveau de maturité. Ces 4 ANR, pas États membres, les 4 autorités de réglementation sont de niveau de maturité 1. Le cadre réglementaire, malgré les tests communautaires, reste encore très faible, avec une absence d'autonomie administrative, une absence d'autonomie financière. 2 de ces États ont des ANR qui dépendent encore des ministères de la Santé et les 2 autres ont déjà mis en place leur agence. Cependant, on a beaucoup de défis en termes de ressources humaines et de ressources financières. Et elles nous ont noté vraiment qu'elles avaient très peu de partenaires pour les accompagner dans le renforcement du système de réglementation. En termes de perception, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons retenir? C'est que la perception générale de la confiance réglementaire reste assez mitigée. Elles reconnaissent unanimement l'importance de la confiance réglementaire, mais dans 75% des cas, on note que la connaissance des concepts qui sont liés à la confiance réglementaire est très limitée. On a également une faible connaissance des principes qui ont été évoqués ce matin et généralement, elles évoquent une perte de souveraineté dans leurs décisions. Cela prouve vraiment que au niveau de notre région, nous n'avons pas encore correctement approprié, nous ne sommes pas encore correctement appropriés la notion et les bonnes pratiques de confiance réglementaire. Et cela confirme un peu ce que nous-mêmes nous pensions au départ de cette enquête. Dans 50% des cas, les ANR assimilent complètement la confiance réglementaire à de la reconnaissance mutuelle, ce qui explique les réticences que nous avions sur certaines stratégies d'intervention. Elles ont relevé aussi un certain nombre de défis qui limitaient cette confiance, l'instauration de cette confiance. C'est l'insuffisance de la confiance d'une ANR à l'autre. Certains pensaient qu'ils avaient un niveau plus évolué dans tel ou tel domaine, donc que c'était difficile de reconnaître ou de travailler ou d'agir avec d'autres. Dans 50% des cas, les enquêtés nous ont parlé d'absence de plateforme, ce qui est effectif, l'insuffisance d'un cadre juridique ou de dispositions nationales qui leur permettaient réellement d'appliquer la confiance avec les autres ANR. Entre autres, nous avions aussi des difficultés en termes d'accès à l'information réglementaire des autres ANR, dans la mesure, même si au niveau de l'UEMOA, nous essayons depuis un certain nombre d'années de mettre des cadres de concertation formels et informels en place pour ce partage d'informations, elles jugent que ce qui existe n'est pas encore suffisamment n'est pas suffisant et n'est pas suffisamment solide. Et aussi, elles ont noté comme entrave une faible communication entre elles et une mise en œuvre incomplète des tests. Cependant, il est important de retenir que toutes ces ANR, au-delà de ces 4, toutes les ANR de l'espace UEMOA appliquent la confiance réglementaire, mais surtout en ce qui concerne le work sharing, c'est-à-dire le partage d'informations, en ce qui concerne les procédures d'évaluation conjointe, que ce soit au niveau de l'UEMOA, de l'OAS, de la CEDEAO ou de la MRH. Elles appliquent aussi, elles adhèrent toutes à la procédure collaborative et il y a beaucoup d'enregistrements qui sont faits dans ce cadre. Il y a même des initiatives de MOU, de conventions bilatérales entre, par exemple, certaines ANR, la Côte d'Ivoire et le Ghana, ou entre elles, le Sénégal et le Niger, ainsi de suite. Et ce sont des choses que nous encourageons. Et pour finir, elles sont toutes favorables à la mise en place de la confiance réglementaire et à son renforcement, notamment avec une priorisation sur certaines fonctions de réglementation. En conclusion, cette étude ne fait que confirmer la nécessité pour nous au niveau régional d'intervenir dans le cadre du renforcement de la confiance réglementaire dans l'espace. Il s'agira pour nous vraiment de voir dans quelle mesure renforcer la sensibilisation des ANR sur les bonnes pratiques de réglementation que l'OMS a présentées ce matin, travailler vraiment à mettre en place des stratégies au niveau régional et au niveau national pour le renforcement de cette confiance réglementaire, appuyer l'autonomisation et la maturation de ces 4 ANR. Parce que ce que nous avons remarqué aussi dans cette enquête, comme je l'ai dit, c'est que le statut réglementaire, le statut actuel de ces ANR était également une entrave à l'application de la confiance réglementaire. Et pour finir, elles ont évoqué la nécessité et nous ont recommandé la nécessité d'une ligne directrice pour les orienter justement dans l'application de cette confiance. Et je pense que la région UEMOA, à l'instar des autres régions, va se baser sur le travail qui a déjà été fait au niveau de l'AMRH pour vraiment renforcer l'implémentation de la confiance réglementaire entre les États membres. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Keji. Thank you to everybody. We actually have time for a few questions before we head off to coffee. So, do I have any questions in the audience? I've got the wrong glasses on, so I can't see if hands are up. No questions. Oh, we have one question. Please. Can we have a microphone to the lady in the... oh, she has a microphone at her desk.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. Rim Salah from... There is echo, but it's okay. Rim Salah from Expertise France. So I just have a question regarding implementing reliance at the national level in authorities. How ODA-NEPAD is helping doing this at the national level? That is my question. I mean, I know that there is the framework, but then at the national level, how is it done?
Okay.
Thank you.
Perhaps I can pass to Selma. You're probably the most directly impacted as a head of a national agency. So how is MRH helping you?
Well, thank you for your question. I think, as I indicated earlier, for us, what happened was that because we understood that there's a continental framework, we sought to align with that. And in seeking to align with that, we sought the assistance of ODA-NEPAD to support us in putting this framework in such a manner that it would, align with the continental one. But beyond that, what then remains is for us to build our own internal processes and guidelines that will lead to the implementation as per that framework. So there's not a lot of involvement beyond supporting the alignment of the framework. Well, I guess ODA can speak to themselves if they offer this widely, but this is the case I think that we have experienced in Botswana, where through seeking assistance, we've been able to do that, and it's still to be implemented fully.
And there's a question directly behind Expertise France, but she does have a microphone. Go ahead.
I think so. Yeah, thank you. My name is Christine, and I'm just going to follow up on the previous speaker's question. I do understand with what Dr. Siema responded on, that at a national level, they do currently have a framework that includes AMA. And our understanding is that this is for new marketing authorization. My question is with regards to post-approval changes. Do we have similar frameworks in place? We have already noted or received headwind from some of the NRAs that they do have concerns that the categorization at a continental level is different to the national level. In some cases, where AMA's category is minor, when you go to national level, it's major. Where AMA has it as major at national level, it even goes on to new marketing authorization application. So as applicants, we are rather concerned. We have seen the successes from new marketing authorization and the adoption at national level, but we are already concerned with post-approval changes and specifically on the differences in categorization. Thank you.
Do you want to say that, or I can do a brief answer? So I can give a brief answer to that. ODA-NEPAD isn't here to speak for themselves. Yesterday, Alex, I think, spoke about the fact that they have finalized the ODA-NEPAD Reliance Framework document. It is not published yet. They're still piloting it just to see how, just to test it. I am privileged to have seen the document and provided some comments. It does include guidance on post-approval changes. So it's not just focused on initial marketing authorizations. Out and NAPAD have really thought this through. And it's through that, and they're looking at the reliance with the whole life cycle management. So you will see it in the document once Out and NAPAD have finalized and published it. And I'm looking at Ntebe saying, just to see, this is correct, yes? It is. She's nodding, so I'm not too far off. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Sorry, not quite. So yes, we've seen the document on post-approval changes, and we've also conducted our own assessment. And there is a difference on how the changes are classified at a continental and at a national level. So that is our concern, and perhaps maybe even the NRAs can also come in on how they will.
But actually, this was covered in the previous session. Somebody asked a question about WHO, the difference in classification, and I believe both DG Mimi and Tumi have said that this is one of the things that ARMA will be looking at. Unless, yeah, I believe that they have repeat at least twice. I've heard Tumi and Mimi say that this is something that ARMA will be looking at. No, we're good. I have a head of agency next to me who's agreeing with me. Question in the back. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the presentations. I'm Pei-Ling Yap from Health AI, the Global Agency for Responsible AI in Health. I just want to ask, we have been talking a lot about regulatory reliance for medicines. What are the thoughts on regulatory reliance for software as a medical device or medical devices? Has there been any discussions on this continent regarding that? What are some of the perspectives?
I mentioned in the discussion that the framework that we have for now covers medicines, and we're going to come up with one for medical devices. But Lerato wanted to make a comment on that because she's leading the work stream on medical devices. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So just to address your question, there is work currently happening on establishing a framework for regulating softwares and AI medical devices currently. So it's still under the regulation stage in alignment with the model law that is being revised. So that the intention for that is to then build on a harmonized or a continental guideline that will then be utilized by national authorities, especially given that most countries do not have regulation of these. And following that, then adapting to reliance would follow, seeing that this is a new field. It is likely that we will utilize a lot of reliance at the initial stages, but the first is to establish a framework and guidelines to follow for medical device with AI and yeah, all those. Thank you.
The gentleman on the far side had his hand up before you, and then we come to you, and then you. 1, 2, 3. I apologize if that's not the correct order, but that's the way I've just seen them. These are the last 3 questions because these gentlemen are standing between you and your coffee. Do you want to come up here and ask the question, or? Yeah, the microphone is gradually making its way to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jui Kekula from the Liberia Medicines and Health Product Regulatory Authority.
regarding the studies conducted, my question is, from your research, are there any advantages or an advantage for a breach or whole reliance? Did your study point out the usage of any of these at a more? Yeah, did they point out any of the use of a breach or whole reliance more than any the other?
So if I compare it, if I make sure that we've understood it, you're asking, is there any research on the advantages of a bridged assessment over full dossier
yeah.
assessment?
Are there any advantage in the usage of any, and did your study point out
So I think
the use of more?
I think Mario in his research has something.
Yeah. As we set out to do the study, we were open-minded, so we were not guided really to go into those discussions. But what we found is that most of the reliance models also were being supported through certain programs. So they were not mainly unilateral reliance, they were more collaborative reliance models. So one part on whether abridged or verification were being motivated or were having advantages, we were not able to see any evidence of that. And more so, we did not have any evidence on recognition itself being used as a model very much in the regions, at least, especially in Africa. The reasons for these results we're not able to establish that, as it was out of the scope. But what I think I could speculate could be that the decisions to use one model or another, I think it would largely depended on the NRAs themselves, and also the kind of collaboration that they were using under that. For instance, in the ESC post-approval changes with, for example, EMA and the 48 other NRAs for the Roche product, you can see that it has been facilitated, through EMA. So there is some motivation for why that is happening. So even as the NRAs are trying to adopt this, they're not doing it on themselves just simply because they want. They're also being encouraged because they're in a program. So this is why this study we want to do for Zambia, to move away from program-centered reliance to more institutionalized reliance, in a way that the NRA should have and should see reliance as a best tool possible available, without waiting to be told, to be asked for what to do, to be told that this is a timeline for you. They need to put timelines themselves even before anything can come through to them. So the motivations for the abridged versus recognition could not be established. But I think these are things that the NRA in its policy needs to review and see which one's the best case to go for, the case, their resources, and also to the interest of public health, how best they can regulate within their resources. I'm able to have a follow-up conversation with you and share more on what we saw, and probably discuss more with the details of the NRAs that we saw, and also maybe some motivation that move them to do those approaches. Thank you.
Briefly.
Yes, so I've just been given a minute. Also, I think just to say in terms of what motivates the choice of one over the other, I think the first thing also is for the time component of it, right? You're saying for certain, for recognition, maybe you approve maybe within even 12 working days or something like that. So that is the motivation sometimes, because it's about ensuring faster access to these products. So also if it's a product that is of a public health need, maybe that would motivate a certain NRA to use one where they just go straight for recognition and not maybe do a breach review where they're looking at certain components. There are also aspects of what information is available to them to make a regulatory decision. Is it suitable for their is it suitable for their NRA? It could be, do they have stability data to make a regulatory decision for the product? If it's there, then they can just recognize and not need to assess the actual data. Over.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you have a microphone, I believe. Short question with short answers.
Ok. Bonjour à tous. Vous avez Abouakar Sango, pharmacien, venant du Mali. C'est juste un commentaire et puis une petite question à l'endroit de la présentation de notre boss au niveau communautaire, Carmel. Voilà. Donc, par rapport à la présentation, j'ai compris qu'au au niveau des 4 autorités nationales de réglementation pharmaceutique, il y avait un besoin de coopération, voilà, de chercher des relations pour justement appuyer ces autorités nationales de réglementation pharmaceutique pour aller de l'avant. Voilà, donc la suggestion à ce niveau, c'est vraiment de continuer le plaidoyer avec lui et moi pour que ces autorités-là puissent bénéficier d'un appui technique, mais pas que, d'un appui financier aussi pour suivre le pas. Voilà, parce que dans la même communauté, on ne peut pas, en tout cas, avoir d'un côté une autorité de réglementation qui a une maturité 3 et les autres qui sont encore à la traîne. Voilà, ça c'est le commentaire, la suggestion. Maintenant, par rapport à la question, c'était dans le sens de la confiance. Les résultats disent que 75% des autorités nationales de réglementation pharmaceutique évoquent une peur de perdre la souveraineté des décisions, dans les décisions réglementaires. Voilà, je voudrais juste comprendre dans quel sens. Est-ce dans le sens que les décisions au niveau des autorités, entre guillemets, qui ont un niveau de maturité plus élevé, puissent leur être imposées, ou bien c'est dans le sens où, au niveau même de l'UOMA, qu'on puisse leur imposer des décisions réglementaires? Je vous remercie.
Keji, you look as if you're about to answer that question. Yes.
Merci, docteur. Je prends acte du commentaire et je pense que c'est dans cette optique, hein, toutes les discussions depuis le premier jour autour de l'AMA ont été claires. Il ne s'agit pas de laisser des autorités derrière, il s'agit d'entrer dans le bateau avec tout le monde et de pouvoir avancer avec tout le monde, d'aider ceux qui n'ont pas encore la capacité à les avoir. Et je pense que depuis pas mal d'années, c'est dans cette optique que la commission de l'UEMOA plaide déjà, mais surtout travaille. Par rapport à la peur, c'est vraiment ça. C'est vraiment de dire votre première proposition, la peur qu'une décision, c'est pas seulement au niveau de l'UEMOA, c'est pas seulement au niveau de l'AMA, leur soit imposée. Mais quand on regarde les principes de bonne pratique de reliance, on se rend compte que c'est parce qu'ils ne comprennent pas bien les principes. Une fois que les principes sont compris, la reliance n'est pas faite pour imposer à qui que ce soit une décision. Et l'OMS l'a dit, Lauda Nepad aussi dans son guideline l'a dit, et c'est clairement. Donc c'est pour ça qu'il faut qu'on sensibilise, qu'on renforce la sensibilisation des acteurs du secteur réglementaire dans nos États sur qu'est-ce que la reliance, quels sont les niveaux de reliance. La reliance n'est pas un concept nouveau, on l'applique déjà. L'OMS a montré un schéma à plusieurs bases et on applique déjà la reliance. Ce qui fait peur en réalité, c'est la reconnaissance mutuelle. En réalité, le véritable problème, c'est la peur de la reconnaissance mutuelle. Et même là, on juge qu'il faut construire la confiance avant d'aller dans la reconnaissance mutuelle. Mais la reconnaissance mutuelle demeure aussi une stratégie. L'Agence européenne du médicament, ça reste l'un des principes, l'une des procédures qui est utilisée, même si elle n'est pas aussi utilisée que les autres également. Donc, c'est pouvoir vraiment sensibiliser et nous pourrons lever ces différentes craintes-là. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. So I'm going to close the session with that. I've got a couple of notes listening to the seven panelists. One is, and these are things you can write down and take home with you, please. The emphasis is on maintaining and retaining sovereignty. And I like to think about this as you are not outsourcing responsibility, you are insourcing competence and scientific expertise. So you are not outsourcing your responsibility, you are insourcing expertise. I think that is a really positive way to think about this. We are talking about informed regulatory reliance, and then we pick up on the comment Keji and some of the audience have asked, is about informed regulatory reliance. It has nothing to do with imposing decisions. And I thank you very much for asking the question. It's really important that we raise this. The other point I think that's important to note is as we go through the GBT journey, the GBT recognizes the relevance and the role of regulatory reliance. It is not seen as a weakness. I think this is something which there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. Reliance is not a weakness. The GBT questions, you go through the questionnaire, it does not, you don't get penalized for informed regulatory reliance in a context of a strategy. Stakeholder engagement. That was mentioned a couple of times, and it's really important as you go through your regulatory reliance in your region or your jurisdiction. Stakeholder engagement is really important. As I've said previously this week, we don't have patients with us this week, and it's really important. So as you go through your process, inform and take civil society with you. That's really important, not just industry. Industry, of course, are important, but the wider civil society are equally important. The necessity for a legal framework or some sort of institutionalized reliance strategy, which is clear and known to everybody, is key. So it's not ad hoc, it's not random. And the last comment for you is really that reliance is a 21st century regulatory tool. It is not an old-fashioned way of doing business. It is a modern, efficient, effective way of doing our business as regulators. And we do it because it benefits us as regulators, and we believe it benefits you as industry. And so with that, I want to thank David, Selma, Nyasha, Mario, Peter, John, and Keji for their contributions, and to thank you as audience for your questions. Have a good coffee break. No, it's gonna have, yes, pretty honest, we'll just quick photograph, right? It's on to a photograph. Sorry, I need to do the last little wind up of voice.
the darkest day, and I find strength along the way. He walks with me through the valley of guides my feet. He lifts me when I fall again. He wipes my tears. He heals my pain. His mercy flows like gentle rain. In his arms, I will remain. Guides my feet where to go. In the dark, he speaks to me. With him near, my fears all flee. I was lost, but now I'm found. My soul is free, no longer bound. Every chain has been undone. Victory came through the sun. He walks with me through the valley of guides my feet where I should go. In the dark, he speaks to me. With him near, my fears all flee. Each morning I rise and give him praise. He's been faithful all my days. And when this life fades away, I'll walk with him in endless grace. He walks with me through the guide my feet where I should go. In the silence, he speaks peace. With him near, my fears all fade.
Sorry? Yeah.
It's a good afternoon, everyone. We are about to start the next session. Please sit. Please take a seat so we can start the next session.
Call them. Huh? Okay.
Maybe you can indicate all the speakers so that they.
You already have this?
Yeah.
So let me. So you only have. I'm sorry. You don't need to call them. Stuart also. They will see. So money. There you go. Laura. Mommy. No, she's not about that. Okay, that's fine.
Hello, can we get started? Session 13. If we can get started, and can I call the presenters to come forward? Okay. Also waiting for the presenters. Can we get seated and get ready for the last session? And thank you very much for being with us and for lasting so long.
Congratulations to you all. Can you get seated? Okay. Can I have the presenters to come forward? Amani El Shahawi and my Kego Nelson Moreri, Laura Vivian, and last but not least, Jean Fidel Bationo. Okay, you can come up and thank you.
Sorry.
Which one are we missing?
Yeah, I understand this one. I understand she's having tea.
Yeah, she's here. It's one of them.
Okay.
Is it this one? I think it's my kid.
Yeah, my cable.
We're waiting for one of the presenters to come through. I can start. All right. Good morning to you all, or good afternoon to you all. My name is Emmanuel Mujuru. I'm with the Federation of African Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, and our paro session 13. The theme of our session is strengthening harmonized oversight and leveraging local manufacturing investments. Just to give you a brief background, Africa is experiencing a pivotal shift toward self-reliance in health products manufacturing, driven by the increasing recognition that sustainable access to quality assured medical products depends on both regulatory harmonization and strong local manufacturing capacity. And as countries advance the continental frameworks in the implementation of African Medicines Agency and continental regional harmonizations for pharmaceutical manufacturing, there is a pressing need for coordinated regulatory oversight that aligns with regional and global standards while supporting local industry growth. This session will focus on strengthening harmonized regulatory mechanisms and leveraging the growing investments in Africa's local manufacturing ecosystem, with many African countries prioritizing vaccine and biosimilar production, environmental sustainability, and advanced quality control systems. Regulators must adopt oversight models that are both supportive and robust. Lessons from other regions, including the Middle East and North Africa, MENA, will be shared to foster cross-regional learning. We're going to highlight in this session practical approaches, early lessons, and ongoing initiatives aimed at building a sustainable, high-quality manufacturing base that contributes to health security, economic growth, and equitable access. We're also going to showcase innovative approaches to strengthening regulatory oversight for local manufacturing, share lessons from medical products manufacturing experiences in Africa and other regions, and explore how harmonization efforts under AMA and regional initiatives can accelerate manufacturing scale-ups, and also discuss the sustainability and quality control as key pillars of Africa's health product manufacturing agenda. Without further ado, it is my privilege to welcome our presenters, and the presentation is in the form of abstract presentations. And we've got Aman El Shahawi, She's going to talk about enhancing biosimilar manufacturing in MENA and Africa and focus on cross-regional strategies for biosimilar development and quality assurance regulatory collaboration between MENA and African partners and lessons for building technical capacity in local facilities. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here today to participate in such a great conference. My talk will be about biosimilars production in Africa, and the presentation will include introduction of biosimilar global market estimates, current landscape in Africa, barriers or challenges to development, cross-regional regulatory collaboration. On the top of that, we will talk about building technical capacity. What are biosimilars? Biosimilars are biologicals product that should be highly similar to reference medicinal product. In terms of quality, safety, and efficacy, there could be some differences, or however, these differences should be clinically non-significant or non-meaningful. As we know, the manufacturing process of biosimilar is the reverse engineering process. So the development is like several steps or includes different milestones. The first or prime milestone is full characterizations and the evaluation of reference medicinal product to determine critical quality attributes, critical process parameters, and of course, quality range for biosimilarity. It's a very crucial step for manufacturers to study and fully understand the reference medicinal product before executions of the proposed biosimilar product. After that, manufacturers should conduct a comprehensive, thorough, and rigorous comparability or biosimilarity study on the level of quality, preclinical, and clinical. For preclinical, we focus only or highly on in vitro because there is an objective to decrease animal testing or remove in vivo testing. According to the latest updated guideline for clinical, mainly comparative pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics is crucial and important to prove clinically equivalent to reference medicinal product and ensure biosimilarity. Global market estimates, according to the latest report in this year, it has been found that the biosimilar market has grown rapidly. Annual growth rate actually ranges from 17 to 25%, and biosimilar market could be segmented into different aspects. It could be segmented by products, by applications, by manufacturing type. And here I selected two examples, one for by product and another for by application. By product, we found that monoclonal antibody segment held a dominant presence in the market due to their long-term use in chronic disease. And for by application, it has found that the growth hormone deficiency, the growth hormone treatment segment is expected to grow rapidly in the recent or the upcoming years in the periods between 2025 and 2034 due to increase the prevalence of growth hormone deficiency. What is driving biosimilar market? There are several factors or several drivers for biosimilar market. It includes patent expirations, cost saving, increasing regulatory hurdles, expanding therapeutic area, and last but not least, growing patient acceptance. And the fundamental needs for biosimilar is to reduce financial burden on healthcare system and improve access for life-saving medicines, especially in low and middle income countries. What about current landscape in Africa? Actually, there is high need for affordable biologics in Africa, and also the market need for biosimilar is growing. So biosimilar market is growing market. However, there is high reliance or high importations for biologics from outsource or from multinational companies. What about manufacturing sites? We found that there are limited numbers in manufacturer in Africa, and they are focusing only on formulation, fill and finish, Unfortunately, Africa lacks drug substance manufacturing, and there is diversification in the market, and there is market or fragmented procurement. All of this can cause or can lead to challenges or barriers for the development of biosimilars. Additionally, or moreover, there is regulatory hurdles. There is some inconsistencies between national regulations and global regulations. Oh. Here, I will add another barriers or a challenge which is related to professional skill. Africa lacks professional skills, especially in biomanufacturing and advanced technology. Oh, I'm sorry. Because our objectives to enhance the localizations and boost manufacturers to produce biologics in our countries, I selected two examples. Actually, they are produced locally in Egypt by Magenta or Mina Farm Pharmaceuticals. The first one is Bonosome, which is 40 biosimilars, which is registered in Egypt in 2023. And the second one is Adesia, which is adalimumab biosimilar. Actually, it hasn't been formally registered yet, but these two products are produced starting from the drug substance or starting from master cell bank. So Egypt achieved this localizations, and our vision in Egypt to enhance localizations. This is our vision in 2030 to reduce reliance on importation and enhance the domestic production of biologics. For cross-regionals, I think for patients, the imperative objectives for patients regarding biosimilars: affordability, acceptability, accessibility, and approval. And to achieve these objectives, we have to follow certain strategy integration, partnerships, and technology transfer. These pillars foster regulatory harmonizations and acceleration. That Zibuna is successful initiatives. If we are talking about strategy integrity, AMA is a promising initiative because AMA depends on resource sharing and capacity building. If we are talking about boosting or enhancing localizations, actually incentives is very crucial, or incentives are very crucial to enhance localizations. The incentives, there are two types of incentives. For policymakers, they should balance between both, one for production-linked incentives and another for market-shaping incentives. So we have to communicate in a clear and transparent way with manufacturers to ensure that they fully understand the requirement and the process to prevent any delay in the approval. For Egypt, there are some collaborations like Eva Farm and Lely Pharmaceutical. Epico, it's a company, Egyptian company. It has a collaborations with Reliance, and also there is a collaborations between Gypto and Roche. I will skip this regulatory collaboration because my colleagues and all presentations during the conference were speaking about regulatory collaborations and harmonizations. This is the last slides for me. I will talk about building technical capacity. Actually, here I will not focus on regulatory building capacity. I will focus only on manufacturer building capacity, and the key lessons is what I will say now. The first one is the knowledge transfer for biologics. Actually, due to the complexity of the manufacturing process, tech transfer is a crucial step for local manufacturers to ensure the knowledge that will transfer to the receiving unit, and the staff in this company will be qualified enough and to conduct the comparability and to conduct the proposed product or biosimilar. The second key lessons for me is the quality management system, which is a crucial, because if there is a robust quality management system, for sure, we ensure that the final product will be quality assured medicine. The last one, or the last key lesson, is the technology master. From my point of view, local manufacturers should invest in advanced technology because the comparability study or biosimilarity depends on orthogonal techniques and several techniques to ensure the biosimilarity. So we have to invest in this advanced technology, and also there is integration recently between artificial intelligence and machinery learning. So we have to invest in this to build the capability or the capacity of the team to produce the proposed biosimilars, which should highly similar to the reference medicinal product. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. And I think we all recognize the importance of biosimilars, biologicals in the management of diseases. And it is a growing sector, as rightly pointed out, with a growth rate of more than 17%. And it presents peculiar challenges that are different from other finished products formulations. I think for housekeeping purposes, we're supposed to finish at 13:45. So in that regard, I'll give each presenter 10 minutes, and then we be open to Q&A. We are in a position where we're quite privileged. We've got quite a bit of time, and I'll then be flexible and also practice due diligence so that we can finish on time. So I then call upon the second presenter. And our presentations are from abstracts. And let me start with the Maikego Nelson Moreri. He is going to talk about regional harmonization for pharmaceutical self-sufficiency. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Do you have the, sorry. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues, regulatory authorities, industry partners, and development stakeholders. Thank you for joining our session today. My name is Maikego Nelson Moreri. I'm honored to present to you on a topic that sits at the very heart of Africa's security and economic sovereignty, regulatory harmonization as the critical enabler of pharmaceutical self-sufficiency. The title of this presentation, Bridging the Gap, is deliberate. There exists a profound disconnect between Africa's regulatory ambitions and our manufacturing realities. Today, I will argue that regulatory harmonization is not merely a technical exercise in bureaucratic coordination, but rather the foundational infrastructure upon which Africa's pharmaceutical independence must be built. The objective of this study was to examine how regional regulatory harmonization initiatives can address regulatory bottlenecks that constrain pharmaceutical manufacturing and market access across Africa. The objective being to analyze the relationship between regulatory harmonization and pharmaceutical self-sufficiency in Africa, identify critical barriers to market access, and propose evidence-based recommendations for accelerating